Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Hope you guys had a great 4th of July weekend with friends and family. Landis, I was already telling you, I went out, I saw the fireworks on the 4th, and I was lying on my picnic blanket in the grass for 2 hours and just enjoying a wonderful community evening. And then I woke up Sunday morning and I was sick. And I don't know if the fireworks got me or the wonderful community feeling or the grass. I think it's the grass.
It's probably the grass. Yeah. That's why I don't go outside anymore.
Oh, for real?
Just stay in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my fault for trying to enjoy community and country on the 4th of July. They got me. The pollen got me. We are doing another huge showdown, 2 showdowns left. We are doing Kansas State versus Illinois. KOTN Showdown today. You estimated 90 minutes on that. We'll see if we can keep it under 90 minutes on the actual Illinois Wildcats, Illini Wildcats Showdown. I don't know if we can do it. We got a lot of feelings about both these teams because we paired Illinois and Kansas State because they're both playoff contenders in our mind. No doubt about it, playoff contenders, but not teams that you're like, boom, shakalaka, no doubt about it, they're going to make the playoff.
Yeah, these are among the 2 most interesting. And if we made a meal out of Northwestern, I think we can do it with Kansas State and Illinois. So I'm interested to see how long that goes, but it'll be fun.
Yeah. If we are just filled with angst and intrigue about Drake Lindsay and Preston Stone, Luke Altmaier and Avery Johnson are going to blow our minds. That's the second part of the show. In conjunction with that, because we are applying this idea to both Illinois and Kansas State, teams in the North are 28 teams that maybe could have their greatest college football seasons ever in 2025. I went through, all 28 teams, I sort of decided this is what I think your greatest season ever is so far. And then how many teams with the realistic expectations that we have for them in 2025 could achieve their greatest seasons ever. And Illinois and Kansas State are 2 of the 6 teams of our 28 on that list. Landis, I think this is an interesting topic because you have to decide what a greatest season ever means. And there are some of our teams who have won a national championship, and it's like, okay, well, that. And there are a lot of our teams who have won multiple national championships. And then it's like, well, which one is better? But also, I think there's something to the idea of what was the season like? How did it unfold? How did fans feel during the 3 months of it, even if it didn't finish exactly as you want? I could maybe argue, well, the season, the September, October, first 2 weeks of November was the greatest it could ever be because you were undefeated. You were number 1 in the country. And then maybe you lost. But man, that feeling from then, that's your greatest season ever. I think we might have some disagreement on what a greatest season ever looks like.
It's hard to define, I think. But I do agree that feelings are a big part of it. It's sort of like, did you enjoy the ride or not kind of thing?
Yeah.
The destination, not the journey, not to get all, sort of trippy about it. But I think it sounds like such a lofty thing, right? Like, have you had your best season ever? Can you have it this year? And it kind of like, you think about it in those terms, it sort of weighs heavy on you. But when you look at what has happened for some of these programs, and for some it's pretty easy to define, for others less so. But it's actually like, it's not that hard to wrap your mind around if you start digging in team by team and kind of look at like what they've accomplished and what it would take to define the best season ever. Which is why we have like sort of a surprisingly robust list of teams that could actually do it this year, I think, somewhat reasonably.
The other thing that's part of this is, how does a 12-team playoff work into your best season ever? Because it provides an opportunity that has never existed before. So, for instance, we're going to talk about Ohio State. Ohio State last year, they lost in the regular season to Oregon. They lost to Michigan. But then the structure of the sport provided them an opportunity to go on a postseason run unlike any in history. Well, how do you compare that to an undefeated national championship in 1968 for Ohio State? How do you compare that to a 14-0 2002 Miracle National Championship with Holy Buckeye for Ohio State? And then how would you, in the playoff era, compare maybe an undefeated run that includes a 4-game playoff run, which in some ways might be better than the one last year, which is two regular season losses and then the playoff run? or the undefeated national championship seasons of the past that did not include a playoff. But for like Indiana, Landis is a team that, they had a great year and made a Rose Bowl one year. And like, that was an amazing thing for Indiana, but they made the playoff, Bill. And that was a brand new thing. Like, I'm curious, how do you think recency bias? There's a lot of people here who weren't alive for some of the seasons that we're going to talk about. So that kind of thing. But do you think the playoff makes it, how much does the playoff factor into something being the greatest season ever? Because you were part of this new thing. Maybe you won a game or two in this new thing. Maybe you ran the gauntlet and won the national championship in this new thing. Does that mean any season that's great in a 12-team playoff, in an expanded playoff, is automatically better than any season that was great that just ended with a bowl?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe, because I could see the other side of it where, especially in a 12-team playoff world, where it's like you had the opportunity to have your best season ever because access was expanded, right? Like in any other year, you wouldn't have had the chance to win a championship or go on a playoff run that maybe didn't end with a championship. So I could see someone almost downgrading a season because of that. I don't think I would, because I think the gauntlet, and that's the right word to use, enhances it. And especially for like Ohio State, right? Like in 2014, it wasn't undefeated. In 2024, it wasn't undefeated. But it also accomplished something in each of those years that had never been accomplished before. They were the first champions of the 14 playoff. They were the first champions of the 12-team playoff. And I think that would have to be factored in when you would put it up against any other really great season that Ohio State had. So I guess I'm of the mind that in an expanded playoff world, especially if like national championship is or playing for it, if not winning it, factors into whether or not you had your best season ever. And just like the road you have to navigate to get there now in the postseason is just increasing so much more difficult than it was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that I think it would enhance any argument that anyone was trying to make for your best season ever.
Listen, we got a lot of coulds and woulds and shoulds in this show. There's not a lot of for sures. So if we got a team in here that I think people are like, what are you talking about? But how could this team possibly have its greatest season ever? But then the issue, Bill, is, are there some teams who have had a season or seasons that are so incredible and memorable and included such great players and such great victories that it can never be topped? So if you're in the never be topped category with the season, then it's like, okay, like, congratulations to you. You've already experienced that. For instance, 2019 LSU. I don't know what you would have to do to outline what a better LSU football season could be.
Yeah.
Your quarterback wins the Heisman. And there are seasons for our northern teams in here. It's like where your team was great, and also you had great individual players who either were a Heisman finalist or won the Heisman. Your quarterback wins the Heisman. You're loaded with memorable NFL talent that you will never forget. You beat Alabama, and you win the national championship, and you are a powerhouse the entire way. But also you have a little bit of that magic because you weren't preseason number one. So it's both surprising and dominant and undefeated and team and individually fantastic. I think maybe we could lock up LSU could never be on a list like this of could you have a greatest season ever, because it's done.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I the only way you would top it, I guess, if you mimicked what Joe Burrow was that year and then went undefeated through a 12-team playoff. But that I don't know that I want to hold anybody to that standard necessarily. Right. So yeah, I would agree with you that LSU seems fairly locked up.
So we have some teams of ours like that are going to be difficult to work through. But let's work through our 6. And if there's anybody in the chat, if you want to send us an email later at askkotn@gmail.com to say, hey, what about this team? I think this team could have its best season ever in 2025. We're not saying, is your best season ever still out there? We're saying, with what we expect from your team this year, is it on the board that it could happen this year? AskKOTN@gmail.com. We frankly have not had a lot of time to get into some of our wonderful questions and comments on recent shows, Bill, because of TMB.
Too much ball.
We're still in our TMB threshold here while we are finishing up our showdowns. We have this showdown today, Illinois, Kansas State. Wednesday will be our final showdown. Syracuse versus Colorado. And then also, we are not going to Big 12 Media Days this year. We did go last year. We're not there this year. We will be at Big 10 Media Days in a couple weeks. But we on Wednesday will be reacting, checking in on some of the things that come out of Big 12 Media Days, which is what we wanted to save at least one Big 12 team for our final KOTN Showdown. While we're doing another Big 12 team here today, I don't know if we're going to get a preseason poll, because one of the things I was curious about is, will Kansas State be the favorite to win the Big 12? The Big 12 has announced they're not doing an official conference preseason media poll. They announced it late. If they had given me another week, I think I would have tried to do it. I think I would have tried to have Kings of the North do the official Big 12 preseason media poll. Have you heard anything? If anybody else is trying to do a media poll that will stand in place of the official one from the conference?
No, not definitively. I did see a friend of the program, Shahan Jeharaja from CBS Sports, maybe allude to perhaps trying to do one himself, but I'm not sure that he's actually doing it.
Okay.
I hope it happens. We need it for posterity, even if it's just to laugh at Big 12 media members who picked Utah to win and picked Arizona State to finish last year, which I'm assuming is why they're not doing it, because they were so embarrassed by how wrong it was last year. But that cannot be a reason to not do it. I think we need these things.
I did see John Wilner, the great West Coast writer who has been a chronicler of the Pac-12 and of college football, suggests that picking Arizona State last in that poll had a negative effect on the conference, because, for instance, if Utah would have had the season that Arizona State had, they would have been seated ahead of Boise State in the playoff, because it took Arizona State time to make up imaginary ground by being picked last, which is, I say, can we just keep beating voters in the head and committee members in the head to be smarter? That you said, I think reflecting a consensus helps history. What were people thinking? I don't think we should be afraid of what people were thinking. But then once people think it, we have to be smart enough as people to throw away things that we just thought and go by the facts and evidence, which we still are not as good at as we should be. But I'll never think that the solution for people not following the evidence is to throw away the evidence to begin with. Hide the evidence from the people. Make sure the evidence doesn't exist, because it just helps. Is Kenny Dillingham mad? He gets all the credit for taking a team that was picked last to the conference title. That's a great story. And it's the kind of thing that gets referenced all the time. And by the way, just because a conference doesn't do it, they can't be the thought police and say, well, that's it. Now there's no way to know. Yeah, there's a way to know. Just have somebody else do it, which, again, I only talk about it all the time. When the Big Ten did this 15 years ago, I did it. I created the preseason poll that now is the de facto official preseason Big Ten poll, which is why if I had another week, I would have done it for the Big 12. Shahan said he was taking the weekend off with his family for the 4th of July. I almost texted Shahan and said, you take the Southern 8, we'll take the Northern 8. We'll get 2 or 3 writers or podcasters who follow each team, and we'll make a combined CBS Sports KOTN preseason Big 12 media poll. But I wanted him to have a lovely 4th with his family, so I didn't text him.
We can still do it. It's not, I know Big 10 media days are happening this week, but the season doesn't start for another 2 months.
That is true. Do you want to do it? If there is not one, if somebody doesn't come out with one this week, do you want to do one?
Yeah, I think we should try to do one.
Okay, we'll do it.
Because we did the Big 10 last year. We're going to do that again, I assume, right? Now there's dueling Big 10. There's dueling Big 10 preseason polls.
Yeah. Right. It's because I changed jobs. But yeah. So, right. But also I might try to do an 80-person Big 10 poll this year. I've been thinking about that.
Don't you think, though, not to belabor the point, but it doesn't look great, I guess, picking Utah to win and picking Arizona State to finish last year. But it was a new conference. All the people who were voting were trying to figure out these new teams and what the dynamics in the league were going to be. I just feel like it'd be reasonable for them to have a much better handle on what the Big 12 is going to look like this year than last year. So even if you were embarrassed by how it shook out last year, I don't think you should be discouraged by that, because it was so new and so kind of weird for everybody to figure out. That I just think it'll be done better this time around if they were to do it again.
And to be honest, when the conference does it, all they do is when you apply for your media credential, you fill out a ballot. I think that's how everybody who got approved for a credential, does a ballot, because I remember very vividly last summer, I was about to get on a cruise ship and I was finishing my Big 12 ballot because I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have good enough Wi-Fi when I get it, because I really wanted to do it. But the thing is, not everybody who applies for a credential for conference media days is an expert on the entire conference. So you get some people who don't really know what they're doing, and I'm not blaming them. It's not their job. They're not paid to know about every team in a conference. But then if the conference doesn't do it, and then it falls to a media group to gather people, when I do it, when I've been doing it, I try to gather the people that I believe know the teams and the league the best. And there's a threshold of like, I think you get a better vote, even though the Big Ten one that we've done is wrong all the time. But again, I just think, why are you afraid of what people think? I swear to God, Landis, if you are afraid of being wrong in this business, get out now, because I've made a living on it. But just because you're wrong doesn't mean doesn't mean you should stop giving opinions. Yeah, oh my gosh, that's a t-shirt slogan right there.
Just because you're wrong doesn't mean you should stop giving opinions.
But then call yourself on it. But then,
sure, yeah.
All right, I'm wearing my sideways crown. Let's talk about the teams that have won national championships very quickly to check in on this. The NCAA actually tracks this on their website, and I reference it all the time because there are so many national championships that teams claim, and it's like, oh, it was the Dock Workers Union 1931 final college football poll that was handed out with 2 weeks left in the regular season, gave it to Air Force, and then they lost their final 4 games, but they're still acknowledged as a national champ. They claim it. They put a trophy in their lobby. That's not what we're talking about here. But the NCAA on their website, they list, like, here are the national champions from a year. Like 1957 might have 4 teams, but they're at least going by somewhat legitimate polls that name things. Although, again, Landis, there were a lot of polls that just handed out national championship trophies before the bowls in the old days. The number of national championships claimed by teams that lost their bowls is astounding.
It's a lot to sort through. But even the NCAA site is not exactly in line with what people claim too. Like, I think like Notre Dame, for instance, I'm confused often with how many national titles Notre Dame has, whether it's 11 or 13 or 29, depending on who you ask.
Yeah. So by the NCAA site, these are our 15 teams that have won a national title. I'm going in order of most recent, and then I'm not going to list all their national titles, but Ohio State last year and a bunch of them, Michigan in 23 and a bunch of them, Nebraska 97 plus 95, 94, 71, 70. Washington in 91, Colorado in 90, Notre Dame in 88 plus a bunch in the 70s and 60s and 40s. Penn State in 86, 82 plus 1912 and 1911. 1911, big year for Penn State. BYU in 84, Pitt in 76, and a couple in the teens. Michigan State, Minnesota, Syracuse, Iowa, Illinois, and I can't argue with the NCAA website, Rutgers in 1869, when they might have been the only team that existed. It was
Where
like
were
Rutgers
you
played.
Rutgers?
I was like, yeah. I was still treating my Civil War wounds, and I was like, oh, I have gangrene in my leg from that they just shoot you with balls instead of bullets back in the day, right?
Just a ball of metal. Yeah.
Musket ball. I got a musket ball in my leg, but at least Rutgers beat Princeton in the only college football game that was played this year. And so they gave Rutgers a national championship. So those are our 15 teams. So like for Rutgers, if you're Rutgers and you're like, is this the greatest season ever? And I would be like, I will point you.
They played 2 games. They played Princeton twice.
Suck it, Princeton.
They were 1-1. They won. They beat Princeton 6-4 on November 6th and lost to Princeton 8-0 on November 13th.
National championship game. Greg Schiano's going to go 10-2 one year and be like, this is the greatest season in Rutgers history. And I'm going to be in the press conference saying, I will point you to 1869. I'm not actually saying that Rutgers' greatest season is 1869. We've come so far since 1869, Landis. Isn't it great?
I might put it up there as the greatest season ever. 1-1 national champs. Come on.
Much less gangrene and a better way to determine a college football national champion.
Does the NCAA site list both Rutgers and Princeton as national champs that year?
What a controversy. This will be our offseason project next year. The great Rutgers, Princeton, Northern College Football Championship Trophy controversy of 1869. 13 schools that don't have national titles in the North: Oregon, Wisconsin, Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland, Iowa State, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Utah, Kansas, Kansas State, and Boston College. So, those teams,
by the way,
Boston College
list both
what's that?
Princeton and Rutgers. Princeton and Rutgers are listed as co-champs in 1869.
Sounds like you want to start doing Princeton. You want to do some more Ivy League stuff on this show? Are we not doing enough
funny.
Ivy League?
We played 2 games.
Those guys just walking around with the gangrene. Musket balls in their legs, playing each other twice for a national championship. That's when ball was ball. All right. These allergies are getting me. Hold on a second. Can you talk about Princeton for 10 more seconds while I cough?
Sure, I guess. Princeton and Rutgers played each other twice in 1869. They were both national champions, just to remind everybody.
Oh, God. Oregon could have its greatest season in 2025. Oregon lost the national championship game in 2010 and 2014. Their only perfect season was 4-0 in 1895. Their highest finishes in the AP poll, they finished number 2 in 2001, 2012, and 2014. They finished number 3 in 2010 and last year. In 2001, they only lost to Stanford. They won the Pac-12. They finished 11-1 with a Fiesta Bowl win as number 2 over number 3 Colorado. So that was like another, in addition to the national championship game losses, that's a tremendous season as well. So like 3 really tremendous seasons, and they were on track to have their greatest season ever last year, because they were the only undefeated regular season team. They were the number 1 seed in the playoff. And if we were still in a 4-team playoff, they might be sitting here, Landis, as the undefeated national champion coming off the greatest season in program history. But with what we think about Oregon, do we believe it's on the table that it could happen in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I would just believe that it is out there sort of generally. Which I guess to say the 2025 team could attain it. I don't know that I would pick them to necessarily, but there's more to strive for. So yes, I think it's still there. And I don't even know. I think you can make an argument that 2024 was Oregon's best season ever. If they don't have a national championship and they went undefeated in their first year in the Big Ten and won the Big Ten, I don't know. It's pretty good.
I think the way they lost to Ohio State hurts that case, because again, there's an argument that Oregon was the second best team in college football last year, and they just had to play Ohio State, and then they still went 1-1 against the national champs. But losing the way they did, not just losing, if they had lost close, and John is arguing for 0-1 for Oregon with Joey Harrington. That's that season we talked about where they were 11-1 with a Fiesta Bowl win and a 2-3 matchup. I was like Joey Harrington on the billboard in Times Square and stuff, right? Like there's they were really good that year. But the bottom line is, there's a national championship sitting out there for Oregon to grab in the next decade. And if and when they do, it will become the greatest season in Oregon history.
Yes.
And I don't think us sitting here in July saying, well, they could have their greatest season ever because they could win the national championship. I think that's true. I, at the moment, would not pick them to win it, but let me see what Dante Moore looks like. Let me see what DeCorian Moore looks like. Let me see how good this offensive line is. Let me see what this rebuilt secondary looks like. Let me see how disruptive Mateo Uyunglele is going to be. Is Makai Hughes at running back going to be an All-American? Is Kenyon Sadiq going to blow your doors off, Landis? Like, there's enough there that I think you have to put them on a list like this, because they are, and this is not the show we're doing, they're the best program without a national championship in college football.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's right. I also, over the weekend, as I was doing some yard work, I was listening to like a podcast about Oregon, and I did start to talk myself into like maybe a year before the year kind of theory for Oregon.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the way they've recruited out of high school, it's like sort of stacks up to like target 2026 is maybe a year where that roster is going to be pretty special. But I've also seen like Ohio State in the past kind of win 1 year earlier than you were kind of expecting as you projected it out. So Oregon could be in similar position.
Yep. Okay. No, I think that is I've given up on that with Ohio State trying to target years, because when you're a tier 1 program, every year's the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just like something crazy happens and you get tripped up when you try to be like, when you're a tier 2 program, I think you can see it, right? Okay. It's not now or never, but this is the shot. But Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, when you recruit at the very, very top, every year's the year. So it could be this year for Oregon. So we feel comfortable. You're okay with this being Oregon being on the list? This could be the best year ever?
Absolutely.
All right. Illinois, who we're going to talk about on this show. They have 3 Rose Bowl wins that also ended in top 10 finishes in their history of their program. 1946, 1951, and 1963. In 1983, they were 9-0 in the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State and Michigan, who were both top 10 teams at the time. They lost their first game of the season to Missouri, and they lost the Rose Bowl to UCLA to finish 10-2 and number 10 overall. They were the first Big Ten team to go 9-0 in the conference when they moved to 9 conference games there. Since then, 1989 and 2001 are their only top 12 finishes. They also went 9-0-1 in 1951. They tied Ohio State 0-0 to the only blemish on their record. And they beat number 7 Stanford in the Rose Bowl. So they have these Rose Bowl seasons, right? And then 83, 9-0 in the Big Ten with wins over top 10 Michigan and Ohio State teams is really good.
Yeah.
The question is, if Illinois makes the playoff, will it be its greatest season ever? Because this is, and then all the great Illinois writers and columnists will be having this kind of discussion, and you'll start going into, especially if they win a playoff game, what's a playoff win mean compared to a Rose Bowl? What does a playoff berth mean compared to a Big Ten championship? Because I don't know that anybody, even if you do think Illinois is going to make the playoff, you don't think they're going to win the Big Ten. So I guess the question is, would making the playoff with what I just laid out make this Illinois' greatest season ever?
I think I might say no. I think if it were to get to the playoff and win a playoff game, yes.
Okay.
But if the scenario is that Illinois goes 11-1 against, and we're going to talk about Illinois' schedule, against a schedule that I think sets up quite nicely to go 11-1. So you go 11-1 and you lose to Ohio State. I don't know. And then you just get you kind of get into the playoff a similar fashion to Indiana last year because you got sort of a break with your schedule and you were a good football team. I don't know that trumps winning Rose Bowls, even if they were a long time ago, or having 10-win seasons where you beat an Ohio State or a Michigan. So I don't think making the playoff automatically qualifies as Illinois' best season.
Okay. Because the part of it, and it's I can't go back into 1983. And if Illinois fans who are watching or listening to this, please tell us at askkotn@gmail.com. Part of it to me is when you are in the playoff race and then in the playoff in this era, you are in the mix. You are in the conversation. Mm-hmm. People outside your fan base are talking about your team. And I think that's an exciting part of it. The idea that you matter. Right. And so 9-0 in the Big Ten and you're beating Ohio State, Michigan in 83. That's quite a thing. And then it's, you got to the Rose Bowl. I'm sure there are many people Illinois fans who, if they didn't go to that Rose Bowl, their parents or their grandparents or their friends or their family, oh man, that was awesome. I think you would get into an interesting conversation. And I hope Illinois gets to have it. I hope all Illinois fans get to have that conversation. Is this our greatest season ever? I don't know. What's a playoff berth mean versus Rose Bowl bid? And that's is that fun, or is that just banging your head against a wall for no reason to try to debate that?
I think it's fun. And I guess I would say as a counter to what I laid out, if Illinois were to go 11-1 and lose to Indiana or USC, but beat Ohio State to defending national champs at home and then go to the playoff, then I think that's a totally different conversation, right? Then I think you talk about that maybe this is the best season ever, even if they go to the playoff and don't do anything once they get there. Because
big wins matter. So that would be matching top 10 wins over Ohio State and Michigan from 83. Yeah. So I think it's 83 as the closest as a modern season for Illinois right now. What's their greatest year? If you want to go back to 46, 51, or 63 for the Rose Bowl wins, we'll let someone who is a greater expert of Illinois history than us decide that. But I think the point is it's definitely possible. There's not such a slam dunk that it's possible for Illinois this year. This one is perhaps more controversial. Penn State. Penn State had 5 undefeated seasons under Joe Paterno in 1968, 69, 73, 86, and 94. They won the Natty in 82 and 86. 86 is their best year. They beat Alabama, Notre Dame, Pitt along the way, and then beat number 1 Miami 14-10 in the Fiesta Bowl in like a people remember that one. That was a banger, right? Like it was like Miami and the U against Penn State with, the black cleats and no names on the jerseys and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And 82 was their first national championship, and it had been like a long time coming, right? That Paterno and they were this East Coast powerhouse, but they had never won a national championship since 1912. They beat number 1 Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. 82 and 86 are monster Penn State years, and an undefeated national championship year in 86 for Penn State, where you beat your rival in Pitt. You also beat Alabama and Notre Dame, and then you beat number 1. It's like, how could you top that? So if you are a Penn State person, you want to put a cap on this and say the conversation is over. Penn State can never have a greater season than 86. I could see that. But would an undefeated national championship in a 12-team playoff trump it? Would that be Penn State's greatest season?
It could. Because, it's hard to top Alabama, Notre Dame, Pitt on the way, especially like Notre Dame and Pitt, and Pitt, Penn State being what it was in the 80s. It's hard to top, but I think, like Penn State, Ohio State's a huge deal now. So if it's an undefeated national championship season where you slay Ohio State along the way, and who knows who you would get on that playoff run, if it's a more again, not to rehash conversations from last year, if it's a more substantial sort of playoff run than having to beat SMU and Boise State, and you knock off a SEC team, maybe you see a Notre Dame, something like that. Yeah, I think there's a way for it to set up that could potentially trump 86. I guess I wouldn't want to speak for Penn State fans and say definitively that it would, but I certainly see a pathway that could emerge that could at least put a undefeated 12-team playoff national championship season in the conversation with 1986.
The thing that I also wonder about is the circumstance around Penn State now. So 82 and 86, and then even 94, right, where they're undefeated. Paterno is saying we should have a playoff. They don't get a chance to play for it. They finish number 2. They're an unbelievable team that's national championship worthy. And if there were a playoff, they very possibly would have won it. What happened at Penn State and for that fan base, at the program? So everything that happened, the seasons that are in contention at the moment, 82, 86, 94, is the best of Paterno. When the best of Paterno made fans of Penn State puff out their chests and be proud to be a Nittany Lion. And then everything happened. And all the confusing and conflicting emotions around that, right? And what Penn State fans have dealt with. And now to be in an era where the defining principle of Penn State football in this era is that they can't win the big game, that James Franklin can't win the big game. So where Penn State is right now is not where Penn State was in 82 or 86 or 94, when they're rolling along with a legendary coach. So sort of more lowered expectations. They've been everything that happened that is now part of Penn State football and Penn State fandom to now win, even if it's, I think beating Ohio State is probably compulsory, to your point. Be like, well, they won the national championship, but they still can't beat Ohio State. But even if say they lose to Oregon, but they beat Ohio State, they're not undefeated, but they beat Ohio State and they win the national championship. I wonder, Landis, where Penn State as a program is coming from, if that would make it greater.
I think it could. I think it's comparable to Georgia, right? Georgia won national title in 1980, undefeated season, but then they had to wait so long to win it again.
Yes.
That in 2021, when they finally did it and beat Alabama, I would imagine that Georgia fans would say that that's their best season ever, even though there's another undefeated national championship season on the resume, because the wait was so long, because you had to slay Alabama to do it. Yeah, so I think that's the pathway for a 2025 or whatever it is, 25 or in the future, for an undefeated national championship Penn State season to supersede 86 or 82, if 82 is the one you hold in higher regard. Yeah.
So will we say it's possible? Do you agree it's possible?
Yeah, possible. Yeah.
It's a high bar. It's 86
super
sets the standard. It's a super high bar. 86 is one of the great seasons in college football history, but we're just talking about where Penn State is and what could happen here. All right. This is a very difficult one. Ohio State. I don't know. 9 claimed national championships. 3 of the claimed national championships are undefeated: 10-0 in 54, 10-0 in 68, 14-0 in 02. And they were also perfect in 2012, but they were banned from the postseason. 2024, everybody just lived through it. We know how dramatic that was. 2014, people watching and listening to this lived through that. We know how dramatic that was. But it's so like for drama and comeback and miracle, right? 14 and 24 from a comeback perspective, where you thought those programs were from their low point to their high point. The distance from low point to high point in a season, oh, that's a good one. Distance from low point to high point, those 14 and 24 Ohio State seasons are, because like LSU, low point to high point, there is no low point. What's the low point of 2019 LSU? There is none.
Right.
2014 Ohio State, they lose in week 2. They have to fight back all year. Their quarterback got hurt in the preseason. That's a low point. 2024, they lose to Michigan right before the playoff. That's a huge low point. So low point to high point. But like best, greatest season, probably a fight between 68 and 2002. Undefeated national champions. But 02 is also so dramatic. One of the most dramatic wins in college football history with Holy Buckeye. And one of the most dramatic postseason championship game wins ever with the Miami victory and throwing the flag and everything else. Like, it is unbelievable. And then 68, the Super Soft stands on its own in so many ways. To be that dominant at a time when people were questioning Woody Hayes a little bit, and then you have these second-year players who lead this revival of Ohio State football. So we're not here to run through every great season in Ohio State history. Bill, the thing that I think we've talked about, when you see what Michigan did in 2023, and you're just undefeated and you run through, and it's the modern era, like Ohio State's two playoff, like the 4, like as you said, they won the 4-team playoff and the 12-team playoff, but neither of those seasons are undefeated. So to have a season like Michigan did in 2023, but now in a 12-team playoff, it would even be magnified. That kind of year, I think it would have to be that. But a modern era steamroller year from Ohio State, where they beat everybody. Could that be Ohio State's greatest season? If they go back-to-back, they beat Penn State and Texas. They've lost all these guys. It's this new crop of players. If they steamroll, is that in the argument?
It's absolutely in the argument, yeah. That's sort of like the only benchmark that's left to clear for Ohio State, I think, as a program, right? Is to put together kind of a season where you are like bell to bell, unquestioned the best team in the sport, and win it all at the end. And I you could probably say that was the case with like 68 or whatever, but like that wasn't the case in 2002. 2002 was insane. They should have lost like 5 times that year. So yeah, I think it's definitely out there. I will say, like, I think you're right that, like, if you wanted to define it now, it's probably 68 maybe. But 2014 was pretty wild, and for like the injury stuff to have happened during that year, it was like, and like for the Cardale Jones stuff, they beat Michigan that year. They beat like Saban that year. It was somebody finally rose up and stopped the SEC from winning every single national championship. That's pretty special. I understand it's not an undefeated season, but I think that there are sort of like layers to that one that elevate it pretty significantly. I don't think it's 2024. For as wild as the playoff run was, I think it's hard to have your perfect Ohio State season without beating Michigan.
Agreed.
Or maybe it's impossible. But yes, a steamroll 2025 that's like a second straight national title that obviously would include a beat, like ending this losing streak to Michigan, I think would very much be in the conversation, if not the definitive perfect season for Ohio State.
Yeah, as you said, like they've never won back-to-back either. So 9 claimed national championships, never back-to-back. But to stop the losing streak to Michigan and go back-to-back, even if it's not a steamroll, I think you're in the argument then. Right? Like it is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And boy, they have a lot to overcome with everything they've lost from last year's national championship team. But, you know, they're very talented. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs are there. Julian Sand might be really good. So I think it's an interesting conversation to have. And again, these are the kind of things, these are joyous conversations for fan bases. Sometimes when we're doing homework here on KOTN, and we don't want to make everybody think about college football as a thesis, but arguing what is our greatest season, no, you're wrong. This season's greater for this. It was more surprising. It was more dominant. It was more joyous. Whatever it is. What a lovely conversation. We encourage people to have those conversations.
It's even more fun when you have it. Like, we can't decide. There are too many good seasons.
There are too many good seasons.
Yeah.
Even if part of that conversation is Doug, you idiot. That's great. It's a great, wonderful, joyous conversation. Sure. So Ohio State is super interesting, but the thing you're kind of waiting for is the modern era wire to wire steamroll, which would have been, which is why that's what 06 would have been.
Yes.
They were preseason number 1 in 2006. They beat number 2 twice, Texas and Michigan. They played the first 1-2 Ohio State-Michigan game in program history. If Ohio State had beaten Florida in that national championship game, this might be locked up.
I think it would be. Yeah.
That you could not put Ohio State on a list like this because they would have been a wire-to-wire national champion with a 1-2 Michigan win and the Heisman winner.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean it can be better than that?
Off the top.
But because that season ended with a loss, the door remains open for, if you're trying to think like, well, what do you guys talk about? We're talking about 06 for Ohio State, but they win the final game. Okay. Kansas State. You've been doing some research on Kansas State, so you are more boned up for our project on like great Kansas State seasons than maybe you were 2 years ago in your life. In 2012, Kansas State got to number 1 on the AP poll at 10-0 before they lost to Baylor, and then they lost to Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, but they had real national championship hopes that year. And in 1998, they were number 1 on the coaches poll for 4 weeks. They got to 11-0, and they lost the Big 12 title game to Texas A&M in 3 overtimes. They got screwed out of a good bowl game, and then they lost to unranked Purdue in that bowl game in the Alamo Bowl. Recent Big 12 titles, 03, 12, and 22, and 2 real national championship runs in 98 and 2012, Bill, that into November, Kansas State was in the thick of the national championship race. So that's the standard here. There's not a national championship, but like to remind people that in the modern era, they've gone deep in 2 different years, being as good as anybody. How realistic is it that Kansas State could have its best season ever in 2025?
Yeah, it's very, very realistic, I think. I do think it's worth pointing out because, yeah, you're right. I knew Kansas State had some great years under Bill Snyder. I was on to be on the sort of like the precipice of playing for a national championship twice. The 2012 season, like they lost to a bad Baylor team.
Yeah, that's
probably more disheartening. The 1998 season was weird because they were right there. They're sort of like controlling their own destiny a little bit, and then they got a break they needed with some other teams on that same day. They were playing for the Big 12 championship, and like they were celebrating going to the national championship as the Big 12 game was happening, and then it got away from them. They lost in 3 overtimes. There was a crucial turnover in that game, late in that game that kind of swung it in Texas A&M's favor. So that's like a heartbreaking season. So they gotten close, but not gotten over the hump. So I think maybe even like making the playoff and putting yourself in a position to play for a title like in the postseason, even though that's an expanded playoff, might qualify if it includes like winning the Big 12, which Kansas State has done a couple times. So yeah, there's a couple different ways I think you could get the best season for Kansas State. That doesn't end with them winning a national title. It's just sort of getting probably as close as it's gotten in the past, if not a little closer, if you're able to win a couple playoff games this year.
I think we've got a Kansas State expert in the chat. Kay Neelio is saying 98, 99, 03, 2012, then not 2003. But that's sort of the seasons we're talking about here. That the thing that I think is the most important reminder here is that the bar is high for Kansas State.
Yeah,
that
it is.
They made the playoff. That's definitely their best season ever. It's like, please know that Bill Snyder had these guys in the thick of the national title race multiple times. But a Big 12 championship, and again, they won the Big 12 3 years ago, a Big 12 championship and a playoff win. Big 12 championship, they're like maybe they're a top 4 seed, maybe they're the 5 or 6 seed. And then a playoff win, like at least get into the final 8. I think maybe a Big 12 championship, but they don't win a playoff game would be no. But a Big 12 championship and then a playoff game that, again, shows how good you are, but also gives the fan base another week of celebration and expectation. That I think might be yes.
Yeah, especially if it's like a Big 12 championship and maybe you don't get the bye, so you get to host like a home playoff game against somebody cool and you win that game and you get to have like a party in Manhattan. Like, yeah, I think that could rise to the level of being the best ever. Yeah, I agree with you that merely winning the Big 12 and getting the playoff, I don't think would get it done. I think you would have to do something once you got to the playoff.
It's a high standard. K. Neelio, I graduated in the early 90s from K-State. Never in a million years did I ever think we'd ever be that good. And we have been very relevant ever since. It's just stunning. So K. Neelio, thanks for being here on a big Kansas State day. Spread the word. We love talking about Kansas State football, and we're going to be getting into Kansas State and Illinois in the second half of the show. The last one here is perhaps insane. I don't know. Notre Dame, 11 natties, 8 of them with perfect records. 24, 29, 30, 46, 47, 49, 73, and 88. 1924 was the Four Horsemen. They're famous. If you don't know what that is, go look that up. 1973, they won 11-0. They were number 3 and then beat number 1 Alabama in the Sugar Bowl 24-23 to win the national championship. That's hard to beat. But 88 is it. I think I don't know that any Notre Dame fans would argue this. 12-0, beat West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl. And they beat teams that finished 2, 4, 5, and 7 in the final AP poll. Number 2, Miami. Number 4, Michigan. Number 5, West Virginia. Number 7, USC. So they beat a bunch of great teams. But that's their last natty in 88. And so it was 15 years removed, 73 to 88. Now we're 37 years removed, 88 to 25. Again, what Notre Dame football has been through, Landis. If and when Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman win a national championship in this new era because of where the program went since 88, is that adding to the argument of when Notre Dame is back at the top of college football, will that be a compelling case for it's the greatest season in Notre Dame history?
Yeah, I think so, because Notre Dame fans have just sort of long been waiting for that time, and a lot of Notre Dame's dominance of college football happened pre-1950. So it's just like longing for an era that's sort of like, you know, long eluded Notre Dame, and I think if you were to get that back, that feeling back, it would be hard to trump. I guess I would say like 88 to include beating Michigan, which like is not a rivalry that Notre Dame plays every year, but is obviously a very important one when it is played. Makes that one slightly more difficult to top, I think. So I would compare it to Penn State. I would say possible, but the bar is pretty high to top an unbeaten national championship season where you play a couple of big time rivals and beat them on the way. So maybe, but I don't know, maybe Notre Dame can go through this season and play Michigan in the playoff or something. And if they were to do that, I know win the national title, that would maybe probably trump 88.
Zapato's 1290 in the chat is saying 77 Notre Dame, which is one of the national championships, but it's not an undefeated national championship. They lost to Ole Miss in week 2, but then got to number 5 and then beat number 1 Texas in the Cotton Bowl 38-10 and finished 11-1. Dan Devine is the head coach and finished number 1. So that's another argument because what I was saying before was undefeated national championships 73-88. So I did leave out 77. So again, like this is. I mean, if Notre Dame fans want to sit down and argue this stuff, like it's awesome. But I would love for a Marcus Freeman coach, modern era Notre Dame team to be in that discussion. And that's the kind of, can you imagine, right? That you're having.
What if the national championship includes beating Brian Kelly in LSU?
Oh my God.
I think that's the winner.
Now you know how to make great seasons, Landis. But so we're gonna have a Newt Rockne, Frank Leahy, Ara Parseghian, Lou Holtz, Dan Devine, Marcus Freeman conversation. Does anybody want to sit down and do that in the offseason? I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would be awesome. So, like, for Notre Dame to be able to shoot for that, because as great as Notre Dame, I do think, Landis, when you've been, and it's why Notre Dame and Penn State are similar, as you said. And I think it's part of why Michigan's 23 season was so important, because you are this blue blood. You are this historic power, but you went through it a little bit. And then when you emerge from that again, I think there's power in that, in the rebirth, right? As opposed to just be like, oh, we're awesome, we won another one. Oh, we're awesome, we won another one. Well, which one's better, 73 or 77 or 88? I don't know. All the 40s. It's how do you even differentiate them? And it's like, well, you differentiate this because they haven't won one since 88. Nobody would get this. Nobody's going to get the next Notre Dame national title confused with anything. It's going to stand alone. And that's powerful, I think.
I think it is. You would even apply that to Ohio State too, right? Obviously, 2002 being undefeated in the wing at all on their own is impressive enough, but it had been since 1970 since they won Lance. It's just a really long time to wait and a lot of disappointment along the way. Any prolonged drought like that, regardless sort of the circumstances, would really paint it in a different light.
Yeah, and that's why if there are Ohio State fans who would argue 14-0 in 2002, the way the national title game played out, the way the regular season miracles played out, and because it had been 32 years, never top it.
Yeah.
If you have a strong argument that way as an Ohio State fan, I'll buy it. I think that's a very compelling case. Like, if you want to put a cap on it, lock it up. There will never be another. And I think greatest season ever, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? I think maybe, to me, it would be if you are a fan of that team and you can go back and relive a season, what season do you choose? And so the ups and downs and the unexpected highlights and overcoming adversity and all that kind of stuff, like, I think that matters, but also because, again, some people like the out of nowhere crazy close games, and some people like, I want everybody in the world to know from day one to the last day of the regular season that we're the best team and we're kicking butt, right? Which of those would you rather have? That's a personal choice, right? Do you want it to be fun and unexpected, or do you want it to be dominant? So that, to me, is that how would you characterize it? Like, the greatest season ever? Because I think it's not only looking back. I think part of it is what it was like going through it.
Sure. No, I think you nailed it with which would you most like to relive. I think is probably the best way to couch it, because you can't put everyone in the same bucket, I guess, of what your preferred pathway is, like you said, dominance or surprise or some combination of both. But yeah, it's just like, which you went through it. Would you want to go through it again? Or you've gone through these 6 seasons? Which one would you pick most want to go through again? I think is probably the best way to define it for any fan base that's having this conversation about a bunch of really good seasons. Yeah.
Okay. Those are our 6 teams we think have a chance to have their best seasons ever in 2025. When we come back, we're going to quickly run through our other 22 teams. What was your best season ever? And we're not doing a 4-hour show, so we're going to do it fast. So again, if you are getting ready and you're like, oh, they haven't talked about my team yet, I know our best season ever is blank. Get that in your head. And then if we say a different year, email us, askkotn@gmail.com, because we're going to run through the other 22 next on Kings of the North. Doug and Bill back. I was chugging Gatorade in the break. Give us a thumbs up if you're if on YouTube. Like us, tell a friend, write a review, whatever, or just sit back and listen to us talk about ball. Just your presence here is more than enough, and we're always grateful for that every single day. Again, we hope you had a great 4th of July. All right, Landis, I have how many teams? I got too many. All right,
yep.
These are the I have what do you have? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the last 4 of our teams had what I think is their greatest season in the last 5 years. So again, just to be fair, ask KOTN@gmail.com. I came up with this. Bill, you may disagree in the moment. And if you're complaining, direct it at me. Indiana, 2024. I think it's pretty close to no doubt about it that Indiana's best year was last year. 1945, they were 9-0-1. 1967, they were 9-2. They beat number 3 Purdue. They got as high as number 4, and they lost to number 1 USC in the Rose Bowl in 67. Those 2 years, they finished number 4. That's the only 2 times they finished higher in the AP poll than last year at number 10. But I think modern era that they got to when they got to the Rose Bowl, they didn't win it. So that the modern era to be in the discussion the whole year and then make the playoff out of nowhere. I think it's Indiana last year. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and they beat the defending national champs for the first time in a while. It was beating Michigan for the first time in a while. And like that atmosphere, I was at that game, that atmosphere there in Bloomington. I would imagine had to be like the best football atmosphere that Indiana's ever had, maybe. So to kind of include that in the season, yeah, I would think it was last year.
Hey, K. Neelio, really great show, fellas. Glad I found you. Hey, man, thanks for being here, K. Neelio. Iowa State last year, I think is right. It's their first 11-win season. It's either last year or 2020. They tied 4-way tie for the regular season title in the Big 12 last year. They have not won a conference title in the Big 12 since 1912. So they went 11-2. They lost to Arizona State. Then they beat Miami in the bowl game, which was kind of like a nice extra little bonus. In 2020, they went 9-3. They beat a ranked Texas team at home, and they lost the Big 12 title game to Oklahoma. And then they beat Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. 2020 or 2024, I say last year, and also all things being equal, a non-COVID year, because then the fans could be part of it. So I think that gives it to last year for Iowa State.
Yeah, I agree. If 2020 is all you have, then hold on to it. But if you have something that rivals it, I would pick that year over 2020 just because 2020 was so weird.
Yeah. So I think Iowa State last year. Michigan in 2023, we've said it many times, it was their 11th unbeaten, untied season. But the only 2 of those since 1949 are 1997 and 2023. So, like, obviously, they have a great early history, but we're not here to talk about whether Michigan's team in 1906 was better than Michigan's team in 1912. 12 claimed national championships, but again, the only 2 since 1949 are 97 and 23, and 97 was shared with Nebraska. We know, of course, that the Connor Stallions NCAA investigation remains up in the air. As we sit here now, there's nothing officially besmirching Michigan's 2023 national title. So I think an undefeated run in a playoff era where there's no sharing the title and you beat Ohio State is their greatest season ever. But it comes already with at least a small asterisk, and it might come with a big asterisk. So we might have to revisit this at some point, depending what the NCAA decides.
But I don't know if it does for Michigan fans, right?
That's very true.
That's who gets to define this. Like anyone who says like it can't because they cheated and you're not a Michigan fan, like that, I hear you, and I don't think you're wrong necessarily, but I don't think there's a Michigan fan that'll say like, oh, well, we cheated, it didn't count. Right. So if that's what the NCAA ultimately like hands down. So I think really no matter kind of because Michigan, I don't think Michigan's going to get the death penalty, right? So short of that, I don't know if there's anything that can happen that would keep Michigan fans from saying that was the best one to go undefeated and win it all.
And then the one thing, and I know our friends Mark Snyder and Nick Baumgardner wrote a great book about this that came out last year or 2 years ago about the 97 Michigan championship. And maybe, I don't know if there's something there, depending how 2023 is viewed in history, depending how the NCAA rules on this, might there be like 90s, like Lloyd Carr, Like Lloyd Carr is he's like unimpeachable, right? Lloyd Carr is just like the grandfather of Michigan football and a tremendous coach. And that was a tremendous team. And the grandfather. So I don't know, like, would you go to that to be like, there's no controversy around that other than it was a shared title.
You could.
It's like, you can just really get your arms around that 97 Michigan team.
Sure. Yeah, you could.
But then there's also, again, it's like, what do you want? But then there's also like Harbaugh. If you are with the Jim Harbaugh sticks it to the world, which can be very appealing to a fan base, sticks it to Ohio State, sticks it to the NCAA, sticks it to everybody, does things his way, brings back Michigan. Who cares what anybody says? That's my guy. That's also very compelling from a Michigan fan perspective.
Yeah, and you do make a good point though. Like if there were nothing other than this and stuff in the 40s, and I think it would be this regardless of what happens, because 97 exists and it's cleaner. Even though there's co-champions, it's a little cleaner. I could see people pivoting to that and feeling a little more comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cincinnati 2021 made the 4-team playoff. Yeah. Lost Alabama in the playoffs. I mean, finished number 4. Like, no doubt about it. Cincinnati 2021. What a year. What a high bar. What a high bar. Good luck to Scott Satterfield trying to reach that. Okay. Let's run through now. This next group of teams is teams that maybe more recently had their best season ever. This is between 1990 and 2020. Did your best season ever fall in here? All right. So, Mike, let's put this one up so I can also reference this. Make sure I get this right. Okay. Utah in 2008, only undefeated team, went 13-0, beat Michigan in the opener and beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. And I'm not, can I speed through these, Landis? This is not the show to do a deep dive on Rutgers in 2006, is it?
Just go ahead and speed through. Yeah. Okay. Shout out to Mike Teal, though.
Utah in 2008, Kansas in 2007, 12-1, finished number 7. They got to number 2 and then lost a 2-3 game to Missouri. Then beat Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. Rutgers in 2006. This is the Rutgers year everybody knows about. Finished 11-2. Lost to Cincinnati and West Virginia. Beat Kansas State in a bowl game. Finished number 12. Beat number 3 Louisville on a Thursday night at home in an 8-0 versus 8-0 showdown. What a year for Rutgers. Wisconsin in 99, 10-2, won the Rose Bowl. First outright Big Ten championship since 62, and Ron Dane won the Heisman, which is a nice little bonus like this. If you had a great team and your guy won the Heisman, there's a couple seasons we have like that, Bill. That's hard to beat, is it not?
Yeah, especially when we don't have a national championship.
Yeah. Colorado, 1990, shared a national title with Georgia Tech, went 11-1-1, tied Tennessee in the opener, lost to Illinois in week 3, won the Big 8, beat Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl 10-9. Good job, Colorado. Northwestern, 1995 and 1948, they won their only Rose Bowl, but like 95, they entered the consciousness of the sporting world. So this is better than 1948. Of course, they made the Rose Bowl out of nowhere. They won the Big Ten at 8. No, they lost the Rose Bowl to USC, went 10-2, finished number 8. That's what we're talking about. Northwestern mattered to all of college football in 1995. And I don't even know, that's going to be a hard one to top, I think, for Northwestern, because there was like a fever that took over college football with what they did that year.
I don't know that one will ever be topped.
Nebraska, I have 1994, but they won titles in 94, 95, and 97. Like, they're awesome. Osborne finally got it done. But 94 was them getting over the top when they had fallen short so many times before, getting to a national championship game and not winning. So I have the first Osborne title as their best year. Washington in 91, 12-0, won the Rose Bowl, shared the national championship. 2023 is close, but Washington does have a national title in 91, Bill. So losing to Michigan in the national championship, I think if they had beat Michigan, it'd be that year.
Yeah.
But instead, it's this year in 91. And then Colorado. Did I already say Colorado? I did say Colorado already. Right. Mm-hmm. So I did everybody, right? Is that all 8?
Yes.
In 1990 to 2020? Good job by me. A lot of history here. All right, let's go, Mike, to the older ones. This happened before 1989. And we're going to start with West Virginia, 1988. They beat Pitt. They beat Penn State. They beat Syracuse. Undefeated regular season. Lost to Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, the national title game, in a 3-1 game. They finished 11-1. It also could have been 2007, but they lost to Pitt 13-9. Or in 2005, they were 11-1. They won the Big East. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, but I went with 88. West Virginia fans, if you disagree, send us to askkotn@gmail.com. Iowa has like a national championship in the 20s or something, but I'm not counting that because in 1985, Chuck Long took over the world, baby. Number one most of the year in 1985. Chuck Long finished second in the Heisman voting to Bo Jackson, a very close vote. They went 10-2. They lost to Ohio State, and then they lost to UCLA in the Rose Bowl. But I think Iowa fans would point and say, I remember what Chuck Long did that year. Two teams in 84. BYU.
Can I ask about 2002 Iowa?
You may ask. Yes.
Because
Orange Bowl, Brad Banks, Iowa, 8-0. Yeah.
But they lost Cyhawk that year, and they were Big Ten co-champs. Is that why 80?
And Chuck Long magic. Chuck Long, like the yes. And they were the number one team in the country, like multiple weeks in 85. But it's worth bringing up. But again, if Iowa fans, sit down and have an offseason discussion around the campfire. 02 versus 85. Very healthy discussion. But yes, good job by you. 84, BYU national champs, 13-0, undefeated, beat number 3 Pitt in the opener, beat Michigan in the Holiday Bowl. Robbie Bosco, the quarterback, finished third in the Heisman. Also in 84, Boston College, 10-2, beat Miami on the miracle Doug Flutie to Gerard Phelan play, beat Houston in the Cotton Bowl, finished number 5 in the AP poll, which is tied for their highest finish ever. And guess what? Flutie won the Heisman. So like BYU and Boston College, man, it makes me want to be doing Kings of the North in 1984, brother. Can you imagine BYU and Boston College we wouldn't talk about in 84?
This would be a radio show. Yeah. Gather the family around the living room, listen to KOTN on the radio.
Oh my God. Fireside chat.
That's what you guys did in the 80s, right?
Pitt in 76, 12-0 national champs. Tony Dorsett also won the Heisman, beat Notre Dame in the opener, Penn State to end the regular season, Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I think we put a cap on that. I don't think Pitt can have a better season than that. Undefeated national champs, Notre Dame, Penn State, Georgia, and Tony Dorsett wins the Heisman. Lock it up.
Yeah.
Purdue, I have 66 for Purdue. Won their only Rose Bowl, finished 9-2 and number 7. Their best in the modern era is 2000 with Drew Brees as a Heisman finalist. They tied for the Big Ten title, made the Rose Bowl and lost to Washington, but they were 8-4. So like that's still 4 losses in a great Drew Brees season. So I went with 66. Syracuse in 59, won their only natty, beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Also in 1987, 11-0 regular season, got to number 4 and tied Auburn in the Sugar Bowl. They had ties in bowl games. How crazy is that? Can you imagine going to the Sugar Bowl and ends in a tie?
No.
Cost $10,000 to go to the Sugar Bowl, and I watched my team tie. My God. Maryland, 53 national champs. Even though they lost to Oklahoma in a bowl game in 1951, they also went 10-0 and beat number 1 Tennessee, but they finished number 3. I don't know. Best since then in 2001, they went 10-2. Minnesota, 1960s, won their last national championship. They're champs in 36, 40, 41, and 60. 60, they were like Sandy Stevens' first black quarterback to win a national championship. And did I get everybody? Did I cover everybody? I think I did.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. So we want to acknowledge very quickly everyone's best season. If I got it wrong, ask KOTN@gmail.com. Our point, Landis, is some of these teams have caps. You're not going to get any better. But there are other teams that have had great years, but you still could have your best season ever, even without winning a national championship, which is where I would say Illinois and Kansas State are. We are not saying they have to win a national championship to have their best season ever, but we're saying the opportunity is out there.
Yes.
Probably a little better opportunity for Illinois than Kansas State, because Kansas State's best seasons at the moment, I think, are better than Illinois' best seasons, at least in the modern era.
Yeah, and because they are more modern, I think it helps the case. So
yeah,
easier bar to clear for Illinois. Yeah.
So I don't know if that was helpful or not. That people find that helpful? It's like, hey, thanks for telling me my team had a good year in 1953. Glad I'm watching this show.
I love to know what happened in the 50s.
Yeah. All right. You want to do a showdown?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. When we come back, Kings of the North, Kansas State versus Illinois. Who would you rather be in 2025? Next on KOTN. Lesmerises, Bill Landis. I don't even know what to do with myself, Landis. These teams are pretty similar, right? Mm-hmm. Like, is this a good matchup in your mind that we have landed on a Kansas State, Illinois showdown? Who would you rather be in 2025?
Yeah, I think so. two teams with reasonable playoff aspirations, and we think the pieces to get them there. Yeah.
Yes. They are both, did I put it in the rundown? They are both 8.5 win totals. Is that a decent win total for these two teams? 8.5 as the over under.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little lower, I guess, than you would assume for teams that we think are playoff contenders. But at least, like for me, looking at Kansas State, I think it makes sense. And what we discussed with Illinois' schedule this year, I think that number is about right. Maybe Illinois could be more like 9.5, but yeah, close.
You're not getting to the playoff with 8.5 wins. So, like, if we're talking about them as playoff contenders, you've got to be on the high end of this, obviously. Kansas State is tied for the favorite in the Big 12 with Utah and Arizona at plus 600. Illinois is 8th to win the Big 10 at 42-1, which I think is too low. I don't know that reflects football. I think that might reflect some other things. To make the playoff, Kansas State is plus 470. Illinois is plus 630. And again, this is just giving us a little bit of a read on teams, Landis, because I find it interesting. 8.5 win total. I think these are comparable teams from a talent perspective, and one is tied for first to win its league, and the other is 8th. And it's just telling us a little bit, as much as I don't know if people still get mad, but like the Big 10 and the Big 12 aren't the same. And I don't know that means anything other than they're not the same. But if you're offended at it's one of these things we get to the auto bid discussions, 4 versus 2, and we don't want to be viewed as a second-class league, whatever. It's like, I think looking at these two leagues through the lenses of Illinois and Kansas State is pretty illustrative.
Yeah, I think we all acknowledge reality. The Big Ten's a little more difficult to, at least to win. Like, certainly to win. But I think like the Big 12 is tough in its own right. It's just that it's a little more bunched up than the Big 12 is, or the Big 10.
And it's not a shot at anybody. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So we think both these teams are really good and super interesting. They've met once. Illinois won at home 40-0 in 1948. And by the way, they both beat Kansas last year. Okay. I have so many feelings inside of me about Luke Altmaier that you have to start with the quarterback position. We're going to do quarterback skill position, offensive line, defensive front 7, secondary, coaching, and then intangible schedule. 7 different categories. We'll pick a team in each of them, and at the end, we will say, who would you rather be overall in 2025? Start us with the Kansas State quarterback situation.
Yeah, it's Avery Johnson, who I think, I guess in some people's estimations, wasn't maybe as good as expected or as good as he should have been last year. I don't know. To me, he was just like a guy who was starting for the first time as a true sophomore who at times looked like it. He's got to be more consistent. And I think if he accomplishes that, then he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Like, it is interesting to me. There are a lot of other quarterbacks who are getting, I think we've had this conversation, like who get pumped up quite a bit, right? Who have accomplished like about the same as Avery Johnson, and some of them I think are even similar in skill set to Avery Johnson. So I don't know. It's like Avery Johnson like gets dinged for some of his erratic play at times, while others sort of get celebrated for being I've always called it crazy person quarterback play, but I don't know. I feel like I should find something
stuff.
I should find something different to describe it. Yeah, gunslinger, whatever you want to call it. I think
you love a quarterback. You love a quarterback who turns his back to the line of scrimmage.
I do. It's just it's aesthetically pleasing. It's fun to watch. It's entertaining. Maybe it's not smart, but it's entertaining.
Yes.
I just there's just a lot there still for Avery Johnson. Last year's first full-time season as a starter, 58% of his passes completed, 2,712 yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions is too many, I would say, or at least you want to be throwing more touchdowns if you're going to throw 10 interceptions. Had 605 rushing yards. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. He is among the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. He might be the fastest quarterback in the country. They were saying in the offseason he was clocked at 23 miles per hour, which is moving. I remember, Ohio State was celebrating, I think, Jeremiah Smith being clocked at 23 miles per hour at one point this offseason. So that's pretty darn fast, especially for a quarterback. And you see it show up too when you watch him play. Like he's elusive. He's hard to get a handle on. I think like mechanically there's some stuff that he needs to refine to just become like a more consistent passer. But when everything is sort of synced up the right way, he can look great. He looks awesome. And I think that's the expectation for him this year, right? Chris Kleiman had a quote in the offseason where it's like he's not sugarcoating. He said, all of us are counting on Avery to take the next step, which is like you better do it, because they need it to happen for Kansas State to accomplish what he wants to accomplish, or what they want to accomplish this year. But I also think there's confidence that he's making that progress. Chris Kleiman said that Matt Wells, the offensive coordinator, said he's seen a lot of growth and maturity out of Avery Johnson in the offseason. So I think there's just sort of the natural things you build upon when you start as a sophomore, in terms of like experience and understanding game situations, and maybe not letting things like affect you as much. Like I think there were times last year where like Avery Johnson would make a mistake, and then it was like he's going to make 6 more because he can't get that one out of his head. And like the BYU game comes to mind. So he needs to avoid doing that. But I am sort of confident that he will take that next step, and I don't really know why you wouldn't be, because there are just so many tools there for him to work with that it would be pretty surprising if he doesn't elevate this year compared to last year.
The thing that frustrates me is when you do preseason quarterback lists, there's clearly 2 different kinds of quarterbacks that we're evaluating in college football in the summer. One is the guy who's done it, and he's shown you what he is. Mm-hmm. And he's a veteran leader, and he knows how to run the offense, and he does things well, and you have a baseline on him. And then the other is the guys that you're making an upside swing, and maybe that's a first-year starter, or maybe it's a second-year starter who just has more growing to do. And if you are putting, when people do offseason quarterback lists, if you are putting veteran guys that you know their baseline ahead of Avery Johnson, I get it. But when we're in the upside swing conversations of quarterbacks, when Avery Johnson is not in that conversation, it aggravates me. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I feel like he is not in that. I think he is in the top group. If we're talking about guys who were basing it a little bit more on traits and potential than what we've seen, I think he's in tier 1 of that group. And if that group is CJ Carr and Julian Sayin and Dante Moore and guys like that in the North, Avery Johnson has more experience than them. And they might have a slightly higher recruiting ranking, but I feel like I already been on this show and went nuts about Rocco Beck being underrated, but Rocco Beck is put more on tape. Do you feel like he's fallen through the cracks a little bit? I think nationally people do not know what to do with him. And so they don't talk about him because they don't know how to evaluate it. But Chris Kleiman's right. If he makes the jump, I'm not sure I think you could count on one hand how many quarterbacks you'd rather have than him if he makes the jump. But what's the chance he makes the jump? Maybe the chance that Avery Johnson jumps into truly elite college football quarterback play this year, what % chance would you put on it?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, like 56.
Okay. I was going to maybe say like 40, but yeah. I mean, like, let's say it's like a 50-50 chance. So that's for Kansas State. I'll roll those dice, because if it happens, man, we're going to be talking about him every week.
The guy that I've been thinking of this offseason, it's like Lenoris Sellers at South Carolina, right? He gets so much shine, and like, I'm not saying it's undeserved. He's a really exciting player, but like, what are the discernible differences between Avery Johnson and Lenoris Sellers as players? Lenoris Sellers is bigger, like he's 240 pounds, I think, and Avery Johnson's not that big. He's like more like 200 pounds. But aside from that, like, I find their games to be very similar.
Yes.
And Avery Johnson, like, is probably more of a threat as a runner, at least more explosive or faster. So I don't know. It's just weird to me that you see Lenoris Sellers pop up on a lot of these like top 10 quarterbacks list, and you don't see Avery Johnson all that much. When I would say, like, at worst, they're kind of
they're similar, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm just looking through it too much for like through a KOTN lens or whatever. But I do think they're similar plays. Like, I'm not going to tell you. Listen, like Julian Sayin and CJ Carr and Dante Moore, these guys we've not seen a whole lot from. They may elevate past Avery Johnson, because I think from like just like a raw throwing talent standpoint, they might have a little more to them. But when you're just talking like dual threats and guys who played last year and kind of went through some growing pains, I don't know why there seems to be a handful of players who get elevated above Avery Johnson in that conversation. When I would say he's right there with those guys.
Yeah. What if Avery Johnson's Tim Tebow?
He's not a battering ram like Tim Tebow, but
yeah. I don't know. All right, so I get because the thing is like you'll see lists that Lenora Sellers is the number 4 quarterback in college football, and Avery Johnson's not in the top 20. Like that's what makes me mad. That's what makes me mad. So I think he is a little bit of a difficult eval because people are not as well, but he's like a huge recruit who kind of like made Will Howard transfer to go chase a national championship because they wanted to get to Avery Johnson. Like this is not some out of nowhere guy. This is the prince that was promised. He's all the way since they got him. He's absolutely on track. And then what that means is leap this year into a playoff caliber quarterback. And so if we think there's a 50-50 chance of that happening, like let's make sure we're acknowledging that going into the year. It's not a guarantee, but he's not the 28th best quarterback in college football. He's not.
No, I don't think he's that. Yeah.
If you're valuing traits and potential at all. All right. Here again, this is I love it when we have only on KOTN kind of conversations. What is the difference between Rocco Becht and Luke Altmaier? Because I'm looking at their
transfer from the SEC and one didn't.
They are like their stats. I've had their PFF stats called up forever. Are exactly the same. Their offensive ratings exactly the same. Altmaier is 22 touchdowns, 6 picks. Becht was 25 touchdowns, 9 picks. Their like ADOT average depth of target is around 10 yards. Their completion percentage is both around 60. Their yards per attempt is 7.6 and 7.8. And so I was on here during the Iowa State show very angry that Rocco Becht is not higher rated. Who would you rather have this year, Rocco Becht or Luke Altmaier?
It's a good question. Probably Luke Altmaier.
Okay. I think I'd rather have Rocco Becht. And again, when you go through quarterback lists, you will usually find Luke Altmaier many places higher than Rocco Becht. He'll be a third-year starter at Illinois, 2 years at Mississippi at Ole Miss. Now this will be his third year as a starter at Illinois. Super important to this what Brett Bielema is doing at Illinois. I think he can be a playoff quarterback, but I think he's got a little lower ceiling than Rocco Becht. I think he's a little bit more of a do the right thing. I think he's kind of in between Max Brosmer and Rocco Becht. Okay. That Max Brosmer at Minnesota last year was a really, like, once he got going, was like a make the right read, do the right thing kind of guy. Rocco Becht, I think, can do a little bit more like, man, that guy got out of the pocket and did some stuff and like ripped a throw. I think Luke Altmaier is in between that. But when I was angry about Rocco Becht not being rated higher, I'm not angry about Luke Altmaier. And when we get to the skill position discussion, there's a lot of similarities, I think, between Iowa State and Illinois offensively and what's going on and what they're trying to do. There's two main things that are in common. They have returning quarterbacks who are good, and they both lost 2 awesome receivers. And I am super intrigued by how both those things shake out. Luke Altmaier was a comeback specialist last year. Illinois led the nation with 5 fourth-quarter comeback wins in 2024. That's from their own website. They're tracking this stuff. So that is a huge credit to Luke Altmaier. But then you also, so it's like you can't come back and win every game. But like the Penn State game, they were down 14-7 at midfield in the middle of the fourth quarter, and he hit A.J. Harris in the chest with the pass. Like just misread the coverage and got picked off and kind of sealed the deal on that. Like you can't put your quarterback in a spot where every fourth quarter he has to lean back. I think he's good, but I don't know that I'm expecting any more from Luke Altmaier than what we've seen. And last year, the first 6 games, he had 14 touchdowns and 1 pick. The last 7 games, he had 8 touchdowns and 5 picks. He's good. I don't know if he'll get to very good. And that makes me wonder a little bit about this Illinois season. A little bit. I
think that's fair. I think the floor is fairly high, right? But you want a more like projectable higher ceiling, I think, than what Luke Altmaier is going to give you. I think generally that Luke Altmaier is probably better than most people would care to realize, but is not. I don't think he has the ceiling of, if everything clicks for this guy, he's one of the 20 best quarterbacks in college football.
I agree. So I'm I'm very willing to get on here and be angry about Northern quarterbacks being underrated, and I'm not there with Luke Altmaier. But so who would we take?
I would take Avery Johnson. And Avery Johnson maybe has a lower floor, but the ceiling, I don't think you compare the ceilings of the two players. So I'm taking Avery Johnson because of that.
I agree with that. And if this is famous last words, and Luke Altmaier is like 32 touchdowns, 4 picks, and is Mr. Leader, making plays, leading comebacks, and we're like, what? Great, we'll be there for it. But I would take Avery Johnson. And again, as we've had with some of our comparisons, the last show when we compared Drake Lindsay and Preston Stone from Minnesota and Northwestern, it's like, how do you compare them? Because they're so different. And this is like, these are both returning starters at quarterback, but just play style and what they're going to be asked to do is so different. One's high floor, one is potentially high ceiling. So we're taking the high ceiling.
Yeah.
All right, skill. I'll go first on skill because, as I said, I think it's very comparable to Iowa State losing Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. It's maybe 80% of that, but to lose Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin at receiver for Illinois, they combined for 109 catches, 1,636 yards last year. Pat Bryant had 10 touchdowns, was a third-round pick. It's not quite Higgins and Noel, but it's in range. Zachary Franklin, 98 targets last year. Pat Bryant, 78. Nobody else on the team had more than 29. So Luke Altmaier fed, and they're both gone. Now, so that's the comparison. My Iowa State-Illinois comparison is similar quarterbacks back, 2 stud receivers gone. Then what? What's not the same is Iowa State is completely rebuilding its offensive line. Illinois' offensive line is all back. We'll get to that. But also, one of the things I didn't like with Iowa State is they brought in 2 transfer receivers, and it felt like they did not have much development at receiver in the program. Illinois has that. Hank Beatty, Colin Dixon, and Malik Elzy are all back and will matter in this passing game. Elzy is somebody who had a good spring, was a top 250 national recruit. His third year could be a guy who jumps. Braden Trimble, true freshman, opened some eyes according to the reporting during spring football, could jump. They also have 2 transfers at receiver that are really going to matter, just like Iowa State does. Hudson Clement from West Virginia, I think can be a number 1 receiver for Illinois. He's a little bit of a Pat Bryant light. I think that's like doable. Is Hudson Clement as a Pat Bryant light crazy to you, or does that sound possible?
I think it's possible. Yeah. If you're going to qualify it with light, not exactly the same player, but gives you some of the same things. Yeah.
And then Justin Bowick is their other transfer. So they have 2 transfers in, but they have a couple more guys in-house. I think the receiver will be okay. They have Tanner Arkin back at tight end as their starter. And then at running back, they were talking in the spring of like a 4-headed monster at running back. And it's like, wow, what a wonderful thing. They had 4 running backs last year. They're all back. They're going to keep doing that. And then the guy who led them in the rushing last year was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go play for Georgia. So they lost Josh McCray in the portal, but they're okay. Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey, and Khalil Valentine are all back. Caden Fagan started off last year. I was talking about, looked like Derrick Henry of the North. I went a little nuts on Caden Fagan, and then he got hurt. He's still, the injury that he had that knocked him out for the last, I think, 8 games last year, he missed spring, but they're expecting him back for this season. He is a big 250-pound physical back who, when he gets downhill, you're in trouble. Aiden Lawfrey is really good, 12 carries for 172 and 3 touchdowns versus Northwestern. And Khalil Valentine's like a good third back. So they did lose McCray, who was 117 for 609 last year. But they're, I think, still good at running back. So I think they're good at running back. They're fine at tight end. And I think they'll be okay at receiver, especially if somebody like Elzy or somebody else in-house pops.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that? You good? Any comments on that?
No, there's like huge, it's huge shoes to fill at receiver. And I don't know. It's just hard to be like, oh yeah, they'll do it. They'll be fine because they were so good at that position. But
Pat Bryant is awesome. Pat Bryant was awesome last year. Pat Bryant like won probably 2 games by himself. Pat Bryant was awesome. And so it can be a little dangerous of he was their get out of jail free card. And so like you can't ask, I don't think Clement is that. I think Clement is like a solid, that's feed this guy, he'll get a first down, but oh my God, we're down by 6 with 3 minutes left. Let's throw the ball up to Pat Bryant and hope he does something. Pat Bryant, Illinois is like this far away from being 6-6 last year. And Pat Bryant is the number one reason why they weren't. If they get in those spots again, they're not going to win all those games because nobody on their team is going to do what Pat Bryant did. But they have the ability to not get to that spot because I do think they have a good run-pass balance with their skill guys and a veteran QB that this offense should work. So, Kansas State.
I'll start at running back for Kansas State because they need to replace DJ Giddens, who is just a phenomenal running back. And like, I think people are reasonably excited / encouraged by Kansas State's ability to do that, even though DJ Giddens was great there for a number of years. The two main guys at running back are going to be Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson. Jackson only carried the ball 39 times last year for 227 yards. He was a redshirt freshman, but I think he showed some promise. People think he's ready to kind of like take that next step to be, whether it's in a tandem with Edwards or like more of a number 2 option, true number 2 option behind a true number 1 in Edwards, I think remains to be seen. Edwards has a ton of juice. I think people may remember him from Colorado. Went to Colorado for 1 year, transferred to Kansas State last year. Was very good as a number 2 back behind DJ Giddens. Finished with 546 rushing yards, had 133 receiving yards, 7 total touchdowns. He's involved in the return game as well. He earned some Big 12 Newcomer of the Year votes last year because of how well he played as the number 2 back. And then when Giddens didn't play in the bowl game against Rutgers and Edwards was the number 1 guy, he had 196 rushing yards and 3 total touchdowns in the Rape Bowl and was named the offensive MVP of that game. Some of the underlying numbers with him, like he, among all power 4 backs who had at least 70 carries, he had the best average yards per carry at 7.4. Like his breakaway yards, the make you miss kind of statistics are very good for him. He's just like super, super slippery. I personally, like, I've not seen this concern expressed really by anyone around Kansas State, but I look at a guy who's 5'9", 170 pounds and wonder how much of a workload can he actually take on. In his career, he's only averaged 7 touches per game. That's not including special teams. So in 1 year Colorado, 1 year Kansas State, he's averaged 7 touches per game. He's going to get the ball more than that. Can he be durable over the course of the season? DJ Giddens last year averaged 18 touches per game, 17 carries, 18 touches total per game. So like if that's the kind of workload that Dylan Edwards is getting, that's a pretty big jump in workload for a guy that's only 170 pounds. He did have 20 touches in the bowl game, but that was a game where you had a lot of buildup, and then it was like sort of a one-off. Like I don't know that Dylan Edwards can carry the ball or touch the ball 20 times per game over the course of a season where Kansas State hopes to play in the playoff. And I think like Joe Jackson is a younger guy is probably not quite ready for that either. So I'm wondering, they have a transfer addition at that position, Antonio Martin Jr. from Louisiana Monroe, who's like a 5'9", 222 pound bowling ball, who's got some pretty good production in his career. And he's obviously a physical runner at that size. I think you could see probably like 3 backs try to make up for what they're losing with Giddens, with maybe Martin taking some more of like the short yardage, the stuff that takes like more of a physical toll, more between the tackles kind of stuff. And Edwards is just like an explosive play waiting to happen every time he touches the ball. So I think with those 3, they can maybe make up for the production there, but those are big shoes to fill, that running back with Giddens gone. Receiver is slightly remade. Jace Brown's back, which is huge. Like he was very good last year. He was their best receiver last year. He's back this year. 74 targets, 47 receptions. He'll just need some help. There were 5 receivers that had 20 targets last year. He's the only one who's back. He was really quite good. I don't think people maybe talked enough about how good Jace Brown was, and he was only a sophomore. He had 823 receiving yards, which is the most for a Kansas State sophomore ever, and also the most for a receiver in a season since Tyler Lockett in 2014. So this is a potential like special, I think, receiver for Kansas State. It's just a question of like, can the other guys they brought in around him hit? And I don't know that it's a guarantee, if I'm being honest. I think the most interesting transfer they brought in is Jerron Tibbs from Purdue, who is like fairly young and inexperienced too, but sort of like came on at the end of last year for Purdue. He only had 25 catches for 305 yards, but if you go back and like watch him toward the end of the year, he had a couple of games against Northwestern and Michigan State where he had like 7 catches in the back half of the season. He's got good size. He's 6'2". He's got some physicality. I think maybe he could pop. I'm less confident in, is it Jaron or Jerron? You were at BC last year. Jaron Bradley?
I think Jaron Bradley, yes. Oh
Jaron
my God,
Bradley,
that guy was good in practice.
Yeah, so he was at Texas Tech. and was like awesome 3 years ago and has not been the same player since then, and really didn't do a whole lot at Boston College last year. So he's sort of got to get it back together and be the player that I think he was a couple of years ago for Texas Tech. If he does, then I think this is shaping up to be a very good receiver core. So I think Brown is excellent. I think Tibbs stands the chance to be pretty good, and Bradley's a little bit of a wild card that I'm not entirely banking on, but maybe could pop. And then tight ends, I think, excellent for K-State. Doesn't blow you away with receiving production, but they had 4 tight ends play at least 100 snaps last year. They're all back. It's a deep group. They'll play a fair amount of 12 personnel. They might even play some 13 personnel with the way that the position group shakes out. Garrett Oakley is back. He's a very good tight end. Started 11 games last year, was second team all Big 12, had 22 catches, 5 touchdowns. He can block. The guys that are with him there can block. And then they added Lincoln Cure in the 2025 recruiting class, who I think might play. If he plays, like, he's not going to play a lot of like inline tight end snaps, I don't think, but maybe if they're searching for some juice at receiver outside of Brown, I could see them putting Lincoln Cure out there as a guy who's like a incredibly highly rated tight end, was number 37 overall in the recruiting class in 2025, but was basically a receiver in high school. Maybe he can do some of that. I don't think he's ready to like handle a blocking load, but he doesn't have to. It's like they're actually in a nice position where they don't need him to do that. They can just sort of maybe give him a package, throw him out there, and see if he's ready to help Kansas State's offense as a receiver. So I think it's a good skill core. Like I really like that they have Brown back, and that Brown has a pretty strong rapport with Avery Johnson at receiver. So I think solid, as long as those guys at running back can give you like a aggregate of what DJ Giddens was last year.
Okay. I think it's Illinois, though.
I think it's close.
Yeah. Really?
I don't like Jace Brown's the best receiver here. Like, I don't think that's close. I don't know. Illinois is deep at running back, but I don't know that they have anybody that can
that's as good as Dylan Edwards
the way that Dylan Edwards can.
I mean,
I think Kansas State's better at tight end.
Sorry, my nose is running. Give me Caden Fagan early last year really was very got me very interested before he got hurt. I think Clement's good. I think somebody, whether it's LZ or somebody in-house, will step up. Interesting. I thought maybe you'd just say, yeah, no, I think Illinois too. Edwards, if Edwards can hold up, and Canelio is saying in the chat correctly so, and as you said, like, just flip that guy some stuff out of the backfield and get him in the open field, and he's going to do some of the stuff that Ohio State did with Trayvon Henderson. It's like, let Dylan Edwards get in space and he'll go crazy. You think it's close?
I actually would pick Kansas State. This would be the first time we've split.
Because you think Brown's the best receiver and Edwards is the best running back.
Yeah, like I think, yeah, I like Illinois' like committee approach at running back. I don't know that there's like an absolute stud there.
I think their committee approach at receiver might be better than Kansas State's too. They
could end up deeper.
I think it's possible that if we were doing a draft of the best receivers, that Kansas State would have number 1, but Illinois might have like the next 4. And if we were doing running back, same thing. Let's call it a tie for the moment.
Okay.
Again, we're evaluating things on a very different level, so we'll call it a tie for a moment. All right. Okay. Offensive line. Illinois has all their starters back. J.C. Davis at left tackle, Josh Geske at left guard, Josh Kreutz at center, Brandon Henderson at right guard. He won the job last year in the middle of the season, started 7 of the last 8, won it in a bye week, and the guy who won it from transfer to Colorado, and Melvin Priestley at right tackle. But they also added 2 FCS left tackles, which I find interesting and am appreciative of, and you're not resting on your laurels. Aiden Napick from Idaho State was a left tackle there last year, and Tyler McMillan was a left tackle at Southeast Missouri State. So people theorize if one of those 2 guys wins the right tackle job, Melvin Priestley could bump inside to guard, and then maybe Henderson becomes your swing guy as your 6th guy. But I think either way, there's not a lot of programs in the country that returning all 5 guys in the offensive line. And they did lose 4 backups in the portal, which is why they had to bring some guys in the portal. But we like up transfers on the offensive line. Here's the problem. With those 5 guys starting last year, they couldn't pass protect. And it was a real problem. Luke Altmaier was pressured kind of a lot, 37.5% of the time. The only Northern starting quarterbacks pressured more were Purdue, Boston College, Michigan State, Northwestern, and they're not winning like Illinois is trying to win, so they've got to protect him better. J.C. Davis, I think, is a borderline chance to be a star, but they got to like fix it. They got to be better. They were good run blockers, but they got to be better. They did give up 14 sacks in the first 5 games and 18 sacks in the last 8, so they got better in the second half of the year. They gave up 7 sacks against Penn State in a game they were in the whole time, but there's parts of that game where their offense became non-functional because it couldn't block anybody. Yep. And it's just like that. Like if you're trying to be a playoff team, you can't let that happen. So it's no shame to go lose in a close game at Penn State, but they hit a part where their offensive line was letting them down. So I think the offensive line has a chance to be good, Landis, but we have to remember that it has to be better. Like it's all back, but it also must improve. It can't just be the same.
Yeah, and it's not sort of inexcusable that they weren't great last year because they were working in transfer tackles. And you just like get to see all these pieces kind of fit together. But then like if they're collectively now moving into this year, like they have to take a next step. If like they don't, it would be, I don't know, a pretty strong indictment, I guess, of Illinois' offensive line development if that's what ends up holding them back from what they want to accomplish. Because I think the pieces are there, and it's almost understandable that it took some lumps last year, but it had to be in service of something. It had to be in service of them like being a very good Big Ten offensive line this year.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Kansas State.
I'll start in the middle of the offensive line because I think it'll be pretty solid there. Sam Hecht is back at center. He was second team All Big 12 last year. He's good. Taylor Poitier is back at right guard. He was pretty solid last year. So those 2 positions I think are locked up. Left guard, I think could be Andrew Langang, who has played 500 career snaps, mostly as a backup. Got on the field a decent amount last year. I am worried about Kansas State's offensive tackle situation, if I'm allowed to be.
Yep.
They brought in George Fitzpatrick in the early portal, transfer from Ohio State, who was like a 4-star prospect, like fine. If he was like a guy Kansas State got out of high school, be like great get for Kansas State. Never really got on the field for Ohio State. And I guess I found it somewhat damning that twice last year Ohio State needed left tackle help, and George Fitzpatrick like never seemed to get much of a sniff there as a guy who was in his 3rd year in the program.
Yes.
So now he's going to go to Kansas State and is projected to be the starting left tackle and has never started a game before. I just think it could be a big ask, and maybe he could take some lumps early on. And this is a team that plays a real season opener. So I don't know that I love left tackle. I'm pretty concerned about that. And then after spring practice, they went out and added JB Nelson from Penn State, who is an experienced guy, was like a big-time JUCO prospect, and then played at Penn State, played a bunch of different positions, started some, was primarily a backup, but mixed in last year. He could be tackle or he could play guard, maybe if Langang's not quite ready. And they also added Terrence Enos Jr. from Pitt, who is, I think, a similar profile to Nelson, just like mostly a career backup, did have to start 4 games last year. I don't think he played very well. But that was a kind of a bad offensive line situation to be in. But it seems like between George Fitzpatrick, who's really never played a snap of consequence, who's going into his 4th year of college football, JB Nelson, who has been primarily a backup and is not exclusively a tackle, nor is Terrence Enos from Pitt, who's been primarily a backup. Like 2 of those 3 need to be your starting tackles. And I don't know that that's a tremendous position to be in. It helps that you have a quarterback who has some escapability, I think, with Avery Johnson. But I think there are 2, in my opinion, I think fairly large question marks for Kansas State this year, and offensive tackle is one of them, because I don't know that it's an awesome situation. And they have a new offensive line coach. The Dallas Cowboys stole their offensive line coach, so that's like another thing you just kind of throw on top of it. So I don't love it. I think it could be okay. I don't love the situation.
So I think it's definitely Illinois on the offensive line, but we're at the point with Kansas State where this could maybe be a holds them back from what they want to be situation at tackle.
Yeah, I think potentially. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you respect this, like they went and got, and again, we're back to one of our favorite topics. They went and got 3 Power 5 backups, and they're hoping 2 of them can be starting tackles. And would we feel better if they went and got a couple FCS or a group of 5 starting tackles to come be this? We probably would feel a little better, right?
Yeah. They lost a starting tackle via transfer to Washington too. I didn't mention that. Carver Willis was a starting right tackle last year in transfer. The other was Easton Kilty, who was like actually pretty good. He was an up transfer. Like that's the kind of guy we're talking about.
He was an up transfer 1-year guy, right? Worked great.
He was an FCS transfer 1-year guy. Like that's they don't have that profile among their transfers who we're going to play.
Okay.
So it's a little, I think it might be more than a little concerning. It might be like actually very concerning, but I don't know. We'll see what tackle looks like. Yeah.
So we're going with Illinois.
Yes.
All right. Defensive front 7. You can start here for Kansas State.
I think Kansas State, I would say Kansas State has the potential to have the best front 7 in the Big 12. I don't think that's too much of a stretch. They were really good up front last year. Second best run defense in the league by yards per carry. They ranked 2nd in sacks per game and 3rd in tackles for loss per game. And they don't bring back everybody, and they lose Brendan Mott, who was awesome at defensive end, had 8.5 sacks, 11.5 tackles for loss last year. But I think there are guys that can make up for his production. I think they're very solid in the middle of the defensive line with Damian Ilalio and Uso Seumalo back at tackle. I guess it's a little unclear whether they're going to play more 3 down or 4 down. So if it gets into a situation where they play more 4 down, I guess you could question defensive tackle depth a little bit, but I think there are a couple of guys who maybe are like listed as defensive ends who could play defensive tackle if you get into more of a 4 down situation. And if you're in 3 down, you have 2 guys who played basically every snap last year coming back to play in the middle of that defensive line. Defensive end production, you have guys who need to up it a little bit, but I think they have a couple guys who could. Toby Osunsamni, I think potential star perhaps at defensive end. He played 303 snaps last year, was 2nd on the team in pressures behind Mott. He had 30. He had only 3.5 sacks and 5.5 tackles for loss. But everything I was reading about like spring ball and what they're projecting for the defensive line, they're like, this guy has the goods and he might be ready to pop this year. I think the same could be true about Chidi Obiazor. Also played 13 games last year, 310 snaps. Was a redshirt freshman last year, got some Big 12 Freshman of the Year consideration. He had 16 pressures and 3.5 sacks, and I think there's just it's another sort of like high ceiling pass rusher. They have like two of those guys to help make up for the loss of Mott. There's returning depth at defensive end. They added a transfer from Alabama named Jayshon Ross, who was a true freshman at Alabama last year and didn't see the field, but he was a 4-star prospect, the number 174 overall in the 2024 recruiting class. So maybe he can provide a boost there too. I think end is deep and potentially like pretty productive. And then linebacker, they have Austin Romaine back, who is one of the best linebackers in the country. Started 5 games as a true freshman in 2023, then started 12 games as a sophomore, was 2nd team all Big 12, led the team with 96 tackles, had 7.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. And like, he's another guy that if you're looking, got to replace the production of Brendan Mott, Austin Romaine can do it from the linebacker position. I think he's an All-American candidate. Desmond Purnell is also back at linebacker. He had 30 pressures last year, 4 sacks. He's another guy who can get after it, I think, in pass rush. Those 2 guys are good. They added Gabe Powers from Ohio State, who like, I don't want to like talk out both sides of my mouth because both George Fitzpatrick and Gabe Powers are guys who were at Ohio State for a long time and didn't play a lot. I like Gabe Powers, just like as a guy who I've like seen at practice do stuff. I actually think he's pretty good in coverage as a linebacker. He's pretty athletic. He's long and rangy. I think he's got a chance to be like a very solid 3rd linebacker option for Kansas State. They also added a Division II transfer named Ralph Ortiz from West Florida, who started 21 games there. He was the defensive freshman of the year in his conference in 2023, and then a first-team all-conference player in 2024. I think linebacker is actually going to be pretty good because Romaine's at the top and he's awesome. So I think this is a worst case solid front 7, and best case, like I said, maybe the best front 7 in the Big 12.
Okay. Illinois, I think, is going to be pretty good too. They lost 3 of their top 4 guys up front. But one of the guys back is Gabe Akis, outside linebacker, defensive end, who is really disruptive. 44 pressures last year, which is 22nd in the Power 4. Better pass rush win rate than Donovan Ezraku at Boston College. Better than Jack Sawyer at Ohio State. Better than Mikhail Kamara at Indiana. He's an All-North candidate. So he is like sort of the headliner of who's back. And then they just stole Wisconsin's defense for like their actual like defensive line.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So their nose guard's going to be Kurt Neal, who was a starter last year at Wisconsin, just like a solid interior guy. And then one of their other like the strong side defensive end is going to be James Thompson, who was a huge transfer, was Wisconsin's like best defensive player maybe 2 years ago, was a 2-year starter at Wisconsin, then got hurt last year and didn't play. He's 6'5", and like you've watched, like go put on the highlight film. This is just a 6'5" guy who's in the backfield. And I think Akis and Thompson have a chance to be awesome. And they are going to blow up some offensive game plans. And then they also have Tamawa Durojive. And again, shout out to Illinois, which has their transfer players do a little 90-second video introducing themselves to the fan base. And the first thing they do is they sit down and they say their name. So Tamawa Durojive is a transfer from Florida State. He's gone Kentucky, West Virginia, Florida State, Illinois. Barely played last year, did play 270 snaps at West Virginia in 2023. I don't know about that. Like this is, so he's another transfer who's probably going to start, but Neal and Thompson, you know what you're going to get. The other outside linebacker with Akis is another Wisconsin transfer, Leon Lowry. 6th-year guy, 4 years at Syracuse. Last year it was Wisconsin, was a starter. And then a bunch of linebackers back. Dylan Rosiak in the middle. Missed the last 4 games last year with an injury, but he's a 3rd-year starter. James Kreutz, who started when he went out, he's also back. Malachi Hood was a rotation guy last year. He's back. And Kenena Odeluga is started a couple games in 2023, kind of got bypassed last year. Anyway, 3-4 guys for the middle 2 linebacker spots, 2 real outside linebackers in Lowry and Akis, and then Thompson, Neal, and they'll figure it out at the other defensive line spot. I like it. And I think Akis and Thompson have a chance to be like blowing stuff up. I think they're solid at all positions in the front 7 with 2 guys who have a chance to be real problems.
Yeah, I think Akis is like I guess we will do like the Big Ten poll. Akis will get Defensive Player of the Year votes in the Big Ten, like preseason.
Real chance to pop, and having Thompson there will help him.
Mm-hmm. This is actually tough because I like both these situations a lot.
I like him too, and it's like I think we started off with some like I don't know about this and I don't know about that. Why were they talking about these as playoff teams? There's a foundation defensively here that I think is real for both these teams. I think if you're saying it's among the best in the Big 12, I think it might be Kansas State as a slight lean here.
Yeah, I guess maybe the thing I would say, so Kansas State's is very good, but it's also losing arguably its best player from last year, and Illinois is not. Illinois is bringing its best player back.
Yep. And Thompson is one of the best defensive line transfers that was out there.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's like it's practically a tie. I would say. I don't know. It's hard for me to pick one. Can we table it and come back to it and see if we need to make a deciding?
We have 2 ties at the moment, so maybe we can split the ties. All right, secondary for Kansas State. Maybe you have some concerns here.
Yes, I would put cornerback up there with offensive tackle. I would say cornerback is maybe even slightly more concerning for Kansas State. There's just not a whole lot to bank on here. Jacob Parrish is gone. He was a 3rd-round pick. But even like he was a 3rd-round pick, like to have a guy who's that good in your secondary, and then your secondary is still going to be a little iffy is like mildly concerning to me. So like I don't think this was an excellent secondary last year, and I think it could be like a real Achilles heel for Kansas State this season if these corners don't pop. Brought in a couple transfers. Amarian Fortenberry from South Alabama, I think has a chance to be a pretty solid player, if not better than that. He started 8 games as a true freshman last year at South Alabama. He kind of held his own, but he did it in the Sun Belt, and he's going to do it in the Big 12. The other transfer they brought in, Jaden Rowe from Oklahoma, just like was there for 3 years and didn't play. So like he was primarily a special teamer. So it's like I don't love that profile of a guy who could potentially start for you. It makes me wonder if there are some in-house like younger guys who might start. Like, I think Fortenberry is going to start. I'd be surprised if he didn't start. But there are some
of my guys. Fortenberry is one of my guys. Yeah,
I think he's that's a fine transfer portal addition. I would say like it's an up transfer, but he played as a true freshman and he popped a little bit. Like there's stuff to develop there for sure. I don't know who the other starting corner is going to be. There are some guys who are in kind of like more in-house guys. Zayshawn Rich is a second-year guy. He played in every game last year as a true freshman. Didn't play a ton, but he was on the field for every game as a true freshman, which I think matters some. Donovan McIntosh, third-year guy. He only played 55 snaps last year as a redshirt freshman. You're asking for like big jumps out of those guys. There's another player, Justice James, who's in his fourth year, who actually played 300 snaps last year, but maybe profiles more as a backup. I think it would be better for Kansas State if these younger guys pop than it would be like if Justice James like has to play 600 snaps at quarterback next year. So I think corner's young, it's inexperienced. You're projecting a lot on guys that I'm not entirely sure are ready for it. Safety seems a little bit better off. VJ Payne is back at safety. He's really good. He started 29 games in his career. He had 64 tackles last year. He's like a all Big 12 candidate, I think, at one of the safety positions. 2 transfer additions, one of which is like very interesting. It's Gunnar Maldonado from Arizona, who was, I think, he's going into a 6-year one. He's old. This is his third school. He started in the Northwestern, then went to Arizona, and now he's at Kansas State. 2 years ago, he was an excellent safety for Arizona. And then last year, he only played in 4 games and had a pretty significant knee injury. So you don't love like banking on a guy getting back to himself after a knee injury, but if he does, then I think safety is like goes from like a solid position for Kansas State to potentially like a very good one. And then the other addition is another Division II guy, Quay Moss from West Georgia. He's like a JUCO guy and a Division II player. He was a good Division II player, but I don't like it's hard thing to bank on when a guy's just sort of like bounce around JUCO in Division II, but he could be the third starting safety. There's some other guys on the roster who have played. Colby McAllister, Jack Fabris have played like 300-ish snaps. McAllister's coming off an injury though, so I don't know. There's a freshman, Logan, I think it's Barty. I think I have it written down. Logan Barty from Florida, who I think had could potentially work his way into the rotation, maybe, if not push for a starting spot. I don't think it'd be great if he does as a true freshman, but I guess he could. So corner is very iffy. I think safety is potentially solid, especially if Maldonado is able to bounce back from his injury.
All right, Illinois has their entire secondary back. Their 5 starters played a combined 3,509 snaps last year. And they're all back. So that's like 700 snaps a guy. Led by Xavier Scott as their slot corner, All-American candidate, third-year starter, first team All-Big Ten last year. He's a guy that he jumped a screen with like a minute left in the first half against Kansas last year and returned it for a pick 6 that like ruined Jalen Daniels for a month. Playmaker. Like you just watch Illinois and it's like, oh, who's that guy like jumping stuff and forcing turnovers. He's an incredible player. I think he is strong candidate first team All North in the preseason. Like he's excellent. Safeties, Miles Scott, third year as a starter. Matthew Bailey, second year as a starter. Bailey led him in tackles last year with 94. Had 13 tackles in the bowl game. And then the 2 outside corners, Torrey Cox and Caleb Patterson, again, all back. Much like the offensive line, though. They have the entire secondary back and the entire offensive line back. And it's like, wow, that's a great thing. But they also have to be better. Dylan Gabriel threw for 291 on him. Dylan Raiola threw for 297 on him. Ryan Brown in Purdue, when Purdue was incompetent. Ryan Brown's first start, 18 of 26, 297 yards and 3 touchdowns. They came back in the second half, and Illinois had to kick a field goal on the last play of the game to force overtime against a Purdue team that went 0-9 in the Big Ten. Like, this is just like they have it all, Bill, but they still got thrown on at times last year. So I think it is very similar to the offensive line. It is unbelievable to have all 5 of your guys back. And I think individually, you believe in all 5 of the guys individually, but the collection needs to be better than it is. And I think it should be. So I think secondary is clearly Illinois here, but it's not just like, oh, lock it down. They're all back. It's a sure thing. Like they also still need to improve, but I think they're better than what the spot Kansas State's in.
Yeah, it's definitely Illinois for me. Illinois was like a middle of the pack Big Ten passing defense last year.
Yeah.
And it's obviously that's more than just the secondary. Obviously, it kind of all goes together. But I don't know. I've spent a lot of time on our show expressing a ton of concern about teams that remake their offensive lines and secondaries through the portal. So I'm not about to downgrade one that returns everybody in both spots. So even if they left a little something to be desired last year, I think there's a reasonable expectation that group collectively will take a step forward and be pretty solid.
And like a lot of the conversations for these two teams is it playoff caliber?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to win?
I think the secondary definitely could be. I think the secondary could be. Yeah.
But they got. I think they have to take a step, right? They can't. They can't get out here and let Darian Mensah in week 2 at Duke throw all over them, right? And they're going to play some good quarterbacks. Like that's the threshold. We know Xavier Scott's excellent, but the threshold is you can't let the best quarterbacks on your schedule throw all over you. All right. Yeah. We'll give secondary to Illinois. Coaching, what do you have for Kansas State?
Chris Kleiman's one of the more solid head coaches in college football, I think. Obviously, an incredible winner at North Dakota State. And he's been, in my opinion, like pretty good at Kansas State. He's 48-28 overall. He's 28-12 in the last 3 years with a Big 12 title. Like I don't know that there's much in the way of frustration. There's one thing with Kansas State that I want to talk about when we get to intangibles. But I think the coaching led by Chris Kleiman here is solid. Matt Wells is the play caller. I guess for the first year, he was like co-OC last year, but wasn't the play caller. And then when the Cowboys stole Connor Riley, Matt Wells, former head coach at Texas Tech and Utah State, is now going to call the plays for Kansas State. And that's like a guy with, I think, some real bona fides as an offensive mind. There's an opportunity, I think, for Kansas State to be a little more creative on offense this year with Wells. Wells has a decent quarterback track record too, mostly at Utah State with Chucky Keaton and Jordan Love, but I think there's reason to be excited about that. And like he and Avery Johnson kind of working together. And then Joe Klanderman is a former North Dakota State assistant who's going into his 6th season as Kansas State's defensive coordinator. And I guess it's been a little up and down on that side of the ball, but a fairly solid track record too. So there's continuity on defense and like newness on offense, but at least it's new with a guy who's been around the block a time or two with Matt Wells.
I think a lot of this for Illinois is about Aaron Henry at defensive coordinator, because we thought Aaron Henry in year 2 last year was definitely better than in year 1. They played more zone. Ryan Walters had played a lot of man-to-man in 2022 when Illinois had the number 3 ranked defense in the Brian Fermeau index, and Ryan Walters got the Purdue head coaching job off of that performance.
They also had like a number 4 overall pick at cornerback.
Yes. And so they just would like lock people up, and they tried to do too much of that in 23 and it didn't work. So Aaron Henry adjusted last year and it got better, and he got a new contract. So he has a new 3-year contract. His rate is going from $700,000 a year to $900,000, but it still needs to be better. And again, this is the threshold. Last year, Illinois' defense in the Fermeau ratings was 58th. That was improved from 75th in 2023. But again, in 2001, they were 32nd. In 2022, they were 3rd. The 12 playoff teams last year, Landis, here's where they ranked defensively in the Fermeau index. 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, 12, 14, 15, 20, 27, 31, 32. Arizona State was 31. Boise State was 32. Illinois was 58th. They have to be a top 20 or 25 defense if they want to be a playoff team. Like they have to take that next step. They still gave up. They gave up 31 to Rutgers. They gave up 38 to Oregon and basically a half. They gave up 43 in regulation to a deadbeat Purdue team. Like it's not good enough. 21.7 points per game was 31st in the nation, but like they had games where they didn't show up. So a lot of praise for Aaron Henry last year and the improvement shown there, but it has to be another step. Because when we talk about adding guys like James Thompson and Kurt Neal and Leon Lowry to what you have up front with Gabe Akis and what you have back in the secondary, there are so many pieces there, Bill. But if this is not a top 20 or 25 defense, they're not going to be a playoff team. Yeah. And that's a leap. They were 58th last year. So Barry Lunny Jr. offensively, you can see like he'll dial it up. He'll do stuff. All of a sudden, the running back's running free. Bielema We know he's the right guy for the right man for the job at Illinois. Although I will note that he's 28 and 22 at Illinois after 4 years. He was 25 and 26 at Arkansas after 4 years. So it's not that big of a difference. And then he went 4-8 in year 5 at Arkansas and got fired. So he's not going to go 4-8 and get fired. But really, this has to be a step defensively, and Aaron Henry has to lead it. And I don't want people to get caught up in like, oh, because there's a lot of stories. And again, I lean a lot on when I'm doing Illinois stuff. Jeremy Warner at 24/7 Sports is just a tremendous beat writer covering Illinois. He has a great story that I read with a lot of quotes from Aaron Henry and a lot of deserved praise for the adjustments that he made and the improvements that the defense made. But it's not good enough.
It's weird, like, because you look at like individual pieces on Illinois' defense, you would maybe just sort of think like, oh yeah, that's got to be one of like a top 30-ish kind of defense, and it's not. But maybe, you had to sort of take a step back, take a step forward kind of thing. I would be surprised if it's not this year, I guess is what I would say. I think there's far too much returning talent for them to be worse, to be any worse than they were last year. But there's just like, I don't know, what's there, like 6 guys on that defense are going to play in the NFL. Like it needs to be, and I think will be better. I would be very surprised if it's not.
So again, I'm not doubting it, but you're just laying down like it must be. All right. So who are we going to give coaching to?
I mean, Kleiman's got the better resume than Bielema, even though a lot of it's at the FCS level.
We don't have a lot of doubts here about either team, do we? We believe in both of them.
I would say, like, if you want to say that Illinois got some like more continuity at the coordinator spots, maybe you give it to Illinois. Plus, Kansas State's got to like replace its offensive line coach in that position is a little patchwork right now. I don't know. Maybe go Illinois slightly. I really like Chris Kleiman. I would be ahead of Brett Bielema in any coaching rankings list, I think. But if you look at totality of staff and like situation, maybe you lean Illinois.
Likely to shove an SEC coach in a trash can list. Bielema's ahead though.
Yeah.
But I also think Kleiman might be higher on that list than people will give him credit for. I don't think Chris Kleiman is afraid to shove somebody in a trash can. He just might not talk about it as much before he does it as Bielema would.
Yeah.
Schedule and intangibles. What do you have for Kansas State?
A couple intangible things. Kansas State is 3-5 in November the last 2 years and was 1-3 in November last year. And there was a lot of talk in the offseason from Chris Kleiman about how he felt like they wore down, especially in the secondary and I think along the offensive line. So they changed their offseason plan. They extended their strength and conditioning program by 3 weeks and then shortened spring practice. And there's a lot of reports of like guys being faster, a couple guys, including Avery Johnson, like running 23 miles per hour. Like I said, there was a detail in one of the stories I read that said Kansas State collectively added 700 pounds of muscle in the offseason, which was like kind of a funny thing. So I think it's a team that like felt like they didn't navigate like an arduous season all that well last year. I think Chris Kleiman like taking a hard look at what he's done in the past and whether or not it's exactly the right thing to do moving forward. And then he changed it. So I think that'll be interesting to monitor. Can Kansas State sort of like sustain through the season? And obviously it's got to be better than 1-3 in November if it wants to make the playoff and win the Big 12. And then the other thing is special teams. Kansas State was 118th in the country in net field position last year. The only power conference teams that were worse were Arkansas, Michigan State, and Oklahoma State, and they were all bad football teams. Really bad punting team. Kansas State was 130th in the country in punting efficiency last year. So, and I could just envision them playing some close games because of the nature of the Big 12. Like I think that stuff tends to matter a little more in a league like that. So I think Kansas State's got to be a better special teams team. Typically they are. Kansas State historically and Chris Kleiman teams are usually pretty good on special teams, but they were bad last year, so they can't be bad again this year.
Did they change punter or is it the same punter?
No, I think it's the same punter, and the kicker's a freshman, I think. So we'll see. Schedule. Can I just say I don't love the way like their schedule is weird. I don't know that it's difficult, but it's weird.
Okay.
It starts in week 0 in Ireland against Iowa State, which we talked about a bunch, and we'll talk about even many more times as we get closer to that. So like you open overseas in week 0 against a banger of a non-conference opponent in a game that absolutely has Big 12 stakes.
Absolutely.
And then you come back after a week off, you have to play Army, like you play a service academy. Like I don't know that I would have structured my season that way. And then they play North Dakota as another non-conference game. And then they play like a Friday night conference road game against Arizona. This is all before the second
But wait,
week.
that's one of those, that's a non-conference game, right? Because that's the Kansas State Arizona game that was scheduled before Arizona was in the Big 12. Because I think the
don't
second
know.
half of
Maybe
the home and home
is
from
that
last
still,
year.
Is that
I
still?
think
Yeah.
that's
Well,
the case.
whatever. It's like a
But
it's
it's
a
Arizona.
power opponent on the road on a Friday night
For sure. Yes.
Not that I think
Yes.
Arizona is going to be great. So like it's just a weird September that Kansas State I think needs to navigate, and like it can absolutely drop that game to Iowa State if the offensive line is not ready or the secondary is not ready. So like that's not a gimme by any stretch. If you look at the Big 12 teams that I consider to be contenders, Kansas State plays Baylor and Utah on the road. Texas Tech comes to Kansas State on November 1st, which is the week after Kansas State plays Kansas. So you worry about like a good team coming to your place after you have a little bit of like a potential emotional hangover there. Kansas State, Utah, and Arizona State are tied for the best odds to win the Big 12, and Kansas State doesn't have to play Arizona State. But the next 5 in the odds are Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, Iowa State, and Kansas State plays all 5 of those teams. So like it's hard to definitively say, I think, what is a difficult Big 12 schedule and what isn't because of just kind of how the league is. But I would say this looks like a pretty difficult Big 12 schedule, which is why the win total is 8.5.
Okay. Also problems for Illinois punting last year, but they did change punters. They got Keelan Crimmins in the transfer portal from Purdue. So they are excited about that. Special teams coach talk about better hang time, that kind of thing. They have 6 very winnable games, 5 of them at home: Western Illinois, Western Michigan, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern at home. If you're going to be a playoff team, you've got to win those games. And then at Purdue, and then a really, really tough one home against Ohio State. So that's 7 of your games, 6 very winnable, 1 tough one. So it's 5 games that are going to make or break the season. At Duke in week 2, which you already have put them on alert. At Indiana in week 4, which is like just going to be a gigantic. We're not going to spend 4 hours talking about that the week of in September. USC, at Washington, and at Wisconsin. So if you want to be, and I was just looking like at the FPI, whatever, ESPN Power Index, which is just a thing to look at in the offseason, whatever. They are both the 44th ranked team, and they have the 44th most difficult schedule. So I was like super confused by that for a while. I was like, what am I looking at? Am I looking at schedule? Am I looking at strength? Like, oh, they are coincidentally the same thing. So if you're going to be real, you've got to go win 4 of the 5 against Duke, Indiana, USC, Washington, and Wisconsin. Like, it's just like it's go time. And again, Jeremy Warner does a great job for 24/7 covering Illinois. I was reading one of his chats with his fans, and he basically indicated he's at like 8 or 9 wins. That's probably where he's going to pick. Like, that's not a playoff team. Right. So here I am, like, kind of fired up for Illinois. It's like, hey, like, it's playoff time. Like, I don't know from an intangible standpoint, like, is this a gotta have it year? Is this a missed opportunity with as many guys back of, the entire offensive line, the entire secondary, a 3rd-year starting quarterback, 3 veteran running backs? You added a bunch of good defensive line guys in the portal. Like, is this a gotta have it year for Illinois? And I think they're leaning into that a little bit. And so then can they rise to the occasion? Right. And so you can't, if you lose to Duke in week 2, you're not rising to the occasion. Like, this is like, they're going to get tested in September. Duke and Indiana in September is really going to let us know what kind of Illinois team this is, Landis. But like, do you think it's a gotta have it year for Illinois? Because now we can get into like, oh, if they go 8-4, is that a disappointment? Is that that's not what I want to have. But like, we're talking about them as a playoff contender. If they don't capitalize on having a bunch of veteran dudes, is it going to be a disappointment?
I think it would be. I don't know that they have to make the playoff. Like, I wouldn't put Illinois in that position, but like 8-4, yeah. Like, there's an opportunity for Brett Bielema to like build some serious momentum for his program, and something like 8-4, even 9-3. Like, if you don't have double digit wins and you're not like in the playoff conversation in a way that actually like feels attainable, then I think that's a letdown of a season, unfortunately.
Yeah.
For Illinois. So that's a difficult thing to deal with for a program that's not always used to having those kind of expectations. And
listen, those 5 fourth quarter comebacks last year, they were against Purdue, who was 0-9 in the Big Ten, Nebraska, who was 3-6 in the Big Ten, Rutgers, who was 4-5 in the Big Ten, and Kansas, who was 5-7 and missed a bowl game. And the other one was in their bowl. So they had these miracle comebacks against bad teams. And again, they are, for everything they did last year, they were like whispers away from being 6-6. If their kicker doesn't make a 38-yarder on the last play the game against Purdue, they don't go to overtime. Like Nebraska was ahead and missed a field goal late in that game that let Illinois get into overtime. That Nebraska and Purdue were both overtime games, right? So what is that? Is that the worm's going to turn this year? But it's like, I will say, going through this exercise, I'm a little less in on Illinois than I have been for most of the offseason. But before we get to that, schedule and intangibles, who are we giving the advantage to?
The intangibles, I like just to talk about the pressure of having to do something this year, I think are very similar for both teams. I would probably go Illinois, because outside of the Ohio State game, it does feel like a schedule that Illinois could get through, could manage. Yeah. I think okay. And Kansas State, I just think it's tricky. The week 0 thing's tricky. This is pointed out in the chat I see, but Kansas State only plays 3 home games total in October and November. It's just like they gotta go win a lot on the road to bring this thing home and try to win the Big 12 too. It's a lot. Not to say they can't do it, but I just think it's a little more to ask of Kansas State than I think Illinois.
Okay, this is going to be a weird one. So we're going to give quarterback to Kansas State. We had ties for the defensive front 7 and the skill. What if we give Illinois the tie for skill positions and Kansas State the tie for defensive front 7?
Okay.
So that's going to give us 5-2 for Illinois. Illinois gets skill, offensive line, secondary, coaching, and schedule intangibles. Kansas State gets quarterback and defensive front 7. But I'm not so sure I would rather be Kansas State in 2025.
Yeah, it's weird.
I am on the edge. Going through Illinois, doing a 5-hour dive on Illinois, I am more on the edge about Illinois because of how many close games they played last year, because of how important I think Pat Bryant was to everything they did last year, because of how their 2 position groups that are back both need to improve. I am a little more on edge than I expected to be about the Illini.
Yeah, I'm not really on edge about K-State. I think when you break it down individually, I'm not surprised that some more things lean Illinois' way necessarily. But there's also just the possibility of a special Avery Johnson season that makes whatever concerns you might have about Kansas State kind of go away. So are we allowed to pick the team that loses the matchups? Yes. Is the team you'd rather be?
So I
do think it would be Kansas State. Yeah.
When I was covering Major League Baseball, it's I would do a playoff breakdown every year. And I just remember people making fun of me for it. It was I had maybe 3 categories for every team. And it was one series. It was the Braves against the Cubs. And the 3 categories, I was Braves, Braves, Braves. And then when it was winner, I picked Cubs. And it was what are you doing? And it's well, just because it's and then I think the Braves swept them 3-0. So it was you're an idiot. I'm not reading you in the newspaper anymore. There are just things about Illinois where I think they can look really good on paper. Quarterback, secondary, offensive line, for instance, and the coaching and the schedule. A lot of it can look really good on paper, but then when you get inside it, it's okay, but you've got to be better. And that's the 9th time I've said that, but that's where I am with Illinois. And I do think magical Avery Johnson, magical Dylan Edwards.
Yeah.
Is there more magic there where Illinois is going to kind of have to grind this thing out?
I do think Illinois is going to have to grind it out. Yeah.
Melvin Priestley, how is your pass protection? And Dylan Edwards is just going to be I'm 5'9", but nobody can tackle me. And so I think maybe I'd rather be Kansas State.
I was hoping, I just pulled up the updated SP Plus rankings from Bill Connolly at ESPN from after spring football, hoping there would be some kind of discernible gap between the two to help me clarify something. And there's not. Kansas State's 18th and Illinois is 19th. So yeah, they're separated by a little more than a point in their SP Plus rating. So.
And again, this makes me happy. This is a KOTN kind of discussion. Nobody else in the country is comparing Illinois and Kansas State, but they absolutely should be compared. And then, so before we make our decision, would you rather be a Big Ten team here, basically trying to be the 4th Big Ten team to make the playoff, or would you rather be in the Big 12 trying to win the Big 12? I don't think Kansas State has to win the Big 12 to make the playoff, but it's the easiest path. And there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee of a second to a Big 12 team getting in. Whereas Illinois is pretty much saying like, okay, like we'll probably give you Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon, and we're hoping to slot in next, and hoping that Washington or Michigan or Nebraska or Indiana doesn't.
People are forgetting
jump
about
up
Indiana.
on us. September 20th, we might have to go to that. September 20th, Illinois, Indiana is just absolutely gigantic.
Yeah.
So it's like, which path would you rather try to do? Win the Big 12 or finish fourth in the Big 10?
Win the Big 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're going to pick Kansas State. Who would you rather be in 2025?
Yeah. Did you see, by the way, the Big 12 is doing a preseason all-conference team, but it's not doing a preseason order of finish? Like the preseason all-conference team was out.
You can do a preseason all-conference team and not hurt people's feelings and not supposedly hurt them in the rankings. And how many Kansas State guys are on the preseason all-conference team?
Will Swanson is like the H-back is on there. That's the only offensive player. Okay. And Austin Romaine is the only defensive player at linebacker.
Okay. All right. Good motivation for Kansas State. Is Sam Leavitt the quarterback?
Sam Leavitt is the quarterback.
Okay.
You want to run through the Northern guys who are on there?
Yeah.
Okay. On offense, Jaheim White from West Virginia is one of the running backs.
Okay.
Will Swanson, K-State's at H-back. Chase Roberts, BYU, is one of the receivers. Joe Royer from Cincinnati is the tight end.
Nice.
Spencer Fano is one of the offensive linemen, as is Caleb Lomu. Bryce Foster from Kansas is also on the O-line, and Jordan Seaton from Colorado. So 4 of the 5 offensive linemen. Will Ferrin, place kicker from BYU, is also on the first team. And then on the defense, the Godfather, Dante Corleone, is on the defensive line. So is our guy. What do they call Dom Orange? What's his
Big Citrus.
Big Citrus, thank you. So you got the Godfather and Big Citrus. What a duo.
Oh my God.
Austin Romaine at linebacker. Jeremiah Cooper from Iowa State in the secondary. DJ McKinney from Colorado in the secondary. Jontez Williams from Iowa State in the secondary.
Okay.
So, a couple Iowa State defensive players there.
We'll see if there's a poll. So we will be back on Wednesday. The Big 12 media days are Tuesday and Wednesday, July 8th and 9th. So we will have a day of stuff to talk about on Wednesday as that percolates. They're meeting in the Dallas area. Again, we aren't there this year, but we will be certainly talking about the Big 12, and we'll be wrapping up our KOTN Showdowns with Syracuse versus Colorado on Wednesday, which, Bill, means we should be nearing the end of our 2-hour shows.
I think so. Yeah, we need the start of the season to get here quick so we can start doing our shows every day and not do 2-hour shows anymore.
Yeah. So we appreciate you guys for being here. Kay, Neilio, thank you for being here, man. Very fun to have new people popping in, and we just love having different fan bases represented. We know that there's going to be a lot of Ohio State or Notre Dame or Penn State or that kind of thing, but to get diehard Kansas State fandom, we're talking about Kansas State football is the way to go. So thanks to you guys, as always, for being here. We'll be back on Wednesday. Thanks to our great producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good for now. He is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.